Welcome back once again, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of The Save Point. I am your host, Joker.
I'm your co-host, Shepard.
My friend, how have you been? Been keeping well?
You know it, baby. It's a long weekend, and I'm just enjoying life, feeling good.
Love it, man. Love
it. How you keeping, baby?
I'm doing pretty well, my friend. I'm doing pretty well. I'm really looking forward to diving into this next chapter that we've started on this overall Metal Gear Solid retrospective that we started off there with the Blood of the Snake, which kind of chronicled the rise and fall of Big Boss. So in this next chapter, what exactly are we going to be discussing?
We're going to be analyzing the first Solid story of a new snake, a younger snake, Solid Snake. Metal Gear Solid 1. We'll be looking at the story therein and the gameplay, the experience, the whole shebang. We figured it would be best to separate the remaining games into individual chronicles. Because Big Boss, a lot of the stuff, as you said previously, was covered in Snake Eater. And subsequent games kind of expanded slightly, but didn't have full adventures, as it were, like full real stories to him. Most of his story, Snake Eater. Whereas Solid Snake really begins in the first two Metal Gear games, which we'll briefly touch on at the beginning. And then each game in his series is so expansive and enormous, it's impossible to, condense them into one 2-hour video.
It would be impossible to do that because there is so much that we are going to cover just on Solid Snake's story alone. And just going on the point that you made there, Solid Snake did have his own stories in the console days of the MSX, but we're not going to dive too much into them. We'll mention briefly on what did happen. They essentially follow on from what happened at the end of Outer Heaven and subsequently with what happened with the Phantom Pain. But I suppose just a little bit of a background on Metal Gear Solid itself. It's a stealth action espionage game developed by Konami and released for the PlayStation in 1998. It was directed, produced, and written by Hideo Kojima, and it follows, as I said, the MSX video games Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, which Kojima had also worked on. In 1996, it was unveiled at the Tokyo Game Show and then demonstrated at a trade show, including the 1997 Electronic Entertainment Expo, before it was finally released in 1998. And I suppose just before we kind of touch on the actual game itself, looking back on that title alone, for the time that it came out at, I had never experienced a game where it was like you were playing a movie.
Absolutely. It did things that I personally never experienced myself when it came to video game. Even some films didn't touch the kind of the quality of presentation. And I know it's PS1 graphics, but the sweeping camera angles, the amazing sound design and music. Oh my god, the music.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
The voice acting as well was top notch.
Oh, top notch. I mean, Snake, voiced by the inimitable David Hayter,
legend.
Absolute legend. He has this amazing gravitas, but also an essence of naivety, because he's a government pawn. He's been sent in with no real information, and constantly he's having to second guess what he's been told, what he's been fed, and what's happening around him. And I think David Hayter carries that across supremely well.
Yeah.
Other cast members, of course, you have Dr. Naomi Hunter, voiced by Jennifer Hale, none other than female Shepard from the Mass Effect series.
Paul Lighting as Colonel Campbell. Cam Clark as Master Miller. Oh my god!
And he's my favorite Ninja Turtle, Cam Clark. I'm gonna say it. I don't know which one he is because they kept changing the colors on the banners or their head
bandanas.
Things. Yeah, the bandanas kept changing the color back in the old 80s show.
Oh my god, back in the good old days. But it really was like such a cinematic experience, and going on a point that you made there, like the sweeping camera angles, the music, especially the atmosphere that it created, really amped up the tone of the environment that you're in. So Metal Gear Solid sold more than 7 million copies worldwide and shipped just over 12 million demos. It scored an average of 94 out of 100 on the website Metacritic, and it is Absolutely, and it is also regarded as one of the greatest and most important video games of all time, which helped popularize the stealth game mechanics and the in-game cinematic cutscenes. And it was something that Kojima, like he really spearheaded that idea of, he wanted it to be a completely immersive experience, that when you're not playing the game and as you're watching these cutscenes happen, like the story is still continuing on. Even during some of these cutscenes, they would have real life footage of like nuclear warheads being assembled, real life locations at the time. Like, it really did feel like you are being completely immersed in this world, which no other game at the time, or even during this era of video games, had done to the extent that Hideo Kojima had blueprinted.
And that's the thing as well, is, sorry to cut across you there, but as you say, no other game was doing it the way Metal Gear Solid did it. And the thing is, we got games like in this same era, you know, because it was the jump to 3D. Other games were trying out new things and new formats for storytelling. You know, Nintendo tried out interesting things with the Zelda franchise. Square Enix at this stage had released Final Fantasy VII, which in itself was a game changer. But Metal Gear Solid was fully voice acted. It had everything was done in engine. It was, you know, so the same models that you were running around the game with and beating up people and sneaking around with were the models that were used in the cutscenes. So there was this seamless element of gameplay and story kind of contravening with each other. As well as that, Hideo Kojima went the extra mile to contextualize so many of the game's mechanics. You know, save points in video games they were just save points. It was like, oh, I've saved my progress, I can turn the game off. In Metal Gear, and I know this was in the older Metal Gears as well, you save the game by logging your progress with your mission handler. You call them up and you're like, oh, hey, listen, I'm here now. And of course, that also led to, you know, some background information being shared and general anecdotes on the scenarios and everything. So it went above and beyond to make sure every game mechanic had a reason to be there. The Soliton radar, as an example, they went into great detail about how this works. They went into detail about how the key cards in the game work, because they couldn't animate you opening a door every time. So they're like, oh, it works with your personal genetic field. And so the lengths they went to just add that level of detail and contextualize game mechanics. I was blown away by that as a kid. It's like, oh my god, there's a reason for everything. It's brilliant.
Yeah, they really did go above and beyond, I must say. And even to this day now, like, if you were to boot this up, like, it holds up remarkably well. Now, granted, we have been spoiled by bigger AAA titles. It's just an evolution of the time of video games itself. Like, but if you go back to reboot Metal Gear Solid 1, like, it holds up remarkably well. Now, granted, the character models can look a bit samey. Like, there wasn't too much detail done to Snake's face or anything like that, or even the other characters, NPCs that you interact with in the game. But when you come into where the codec is, it's fully animated. You can see when Snake gets pissed off, he frowns, or he'd be staring directly into the camera. You can see when he's cracking a joke, the curves of his mouth would like turn into a wry grin, and it's like we could actually make an entire video just on the codec calls alone. But it really did, like, when you press the select button and that window came up and the drop-down menu came up as to who you could contact about getting certain information on weapons, certain amounts of information on the area that you're in, some advice to be given to you, like, it does feel like you have a genuine support network behind you, and these people do have personalities. But the main person who you're going to be pretty much in contact with at all time is, as you said, your mission handler, which is Colonel Campbell. So kind of continuing on from the last video that we talked about in terms of Big Boss's story, coming now into this new era of the Snake story. The first Metal Gear game that came out was for the MSX, and it follows up with a young Green Beret who's given the codename Solid Snake. His mission handler now is Big Boss, and he's been told that he has to infiltrate this gigantic fortress where a man by the name of Dr. Keown Marv has been kidnapped. Once Snake gets in there, he has to find prisoners of war who give him information on where Keown Marv is being held, all this kind of thing. Solid Snake's ally, and I dare say probably his best friend and closest confidant, was also another sleeper agent in the Green Berets who was given the name Grey Fox, which is the highest title you could be given to in this unit, called the Foxhound unit. These are like the elite guys. Like they're the Jedi Knights, I suppose, of Special Forces infiltrators. Grey Fox had been captured as he was trying to rescue Keomarv, and in a burst transmission called the last thing that you hear Grey Fox say is, "Oh, it's a weapon to surpass all weapons." The way he describes it is like there's something going on in this complex that you have to stop, and when you get in there, you rescue Grey Fox, and towards the end of the game, it turns out that the whole thing was one big giant plot by Big Boss. However, it's not the Big Boss that we thought it was. The person who you fight at the end of the game is actually Venom Snake from the Phantom Pain.
It's a clever bit of retconning on Kojima's part, because in the original Metal Gear, the idea was that you kill Big Boss, and then you fight him again in Metal Gear 2, and you're like, well, no, I killed this guy.
Yeah.
So it was a clever way to circumvent that of, because Big Boss dies so many fucking times. It was an interesting way for him to kind of retcon that story and be like, well, Venom Snake slots into that position nicely while Big Boss is off doing Outer Heaven.
Yeah. After the action, exactly, like, so when Big Boss starts to move on to do Outer Heaven in Zanzibar Land, after the events of the first Metal Gear story, Solid Snake he suffers a lot from PTSD, because he's just after destroying his unit essentially, and the person who brought him up in this unit. He's asked again by the CIA to infiltrate, as I said, Zanzibar Land, which is where Outer Heaven really had its blue point on the map. And it turns out that Frank Yeager is the one now behind this. Frank Yeager is also the true real life name of Grey Fox. But in this game now, you go through two bosses. You go through Grey Fox himself, and you fight him barefisted in a landmine field, which will be referenced. Like this triggers something that we will get to in Metal Gear Solid 1. And then right at the end of the game, Big Boss makes his appearance again, and it's like, well, I thought I killed you in the first game, but this is the real Big Boss now. And Snake takes him out with a makeshift flamethrower. He blows up the facility, destroys the Metal Gear in this facility, and then retires into the wilderness of Alaska and says, I'm done with war, I'm done with fighting. But there's still that, I always felt that in his character, he enjoys war, he enjoys killing. It's the only thing he knows. So to hang that up, it's a bit it kind of deflates his character a little bit. And he's been retired for a certain amount of years, and lo and behold, one day he gets a phone call from an old war buddy of his. So officially, where does Metal Gear Solid 1 begin?
So Metal Gear Solid 1, it begins with Snake's old friend, Colonel Campbell.
The man himself.
Yeah, contacting Snake out of the blue. Snake is retired in Alaska, so he's actually quite conveniently located for a mission that Colonel Campbell needs his particular set of skills for. He explains to Solid Snake, or David, as he's known as well, that a weapons facility in Alaska has been taken over, located in Alaska's Fox Archipelago. Noticing a theme with foxes. And he needs Snake, because Snake's the only one who can do it. He's the man. He's the man for the mission. So during Snake's briefing, he meets some of his support team, Dr. Naomi Hunter. She injects him with a suppressant to keep his stomach acids at bay, and Snake, being the cheeky boy that he is, swallows a pack of cigarettes to sneak onto the base with him. Yeah,
she says, "How did you get the cigarettes in?" Or I think it's Mei Ling. It says, "How did you manage to get them in there?" He said, "In my stomach."
Clever man. Clever man. And like, well, why'd you bother sneaking cigarettes in? He's like, you never know when they might come in handy. And
which does come into a gameplay mechanic later on, doesn't it?
And that's what I love, is it's tying story and gameplay together really well. It plays up to Snake's slightly playful nature, while also giving you a contextual reason to work on something later on. So you get your briefing. Campbell explains that former Foxhound members have infiltrated the facility, and they're demanding the return of Big Boss's ashes and $1 billion.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah, there's a nice old reference for you. I really hope the people that watch our video are over 25. Um, so Snake reluctantly agrees. Not that he has a choice, really. They never do in these scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And he's sent via submarine to infiltrate Shadow Moses, the facility in Alaska.
Oh my god!
What a name, Shadow Moses.
But even the actual like when you get out of the submarine at that moment, you're in this kind of dock level.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first played the game, like I actually felt this air of claustrophobia about me, because it just literally drops you into this world, and it's like, go.
Yeah.
But you have to be super, super careful about how you plan your moves here, because essentially you're one man on this one mission. You have no backup. Nobody is going to help you. You need to pay very, very close attention to how enemies are moving about the place. You are completely overpowered and over manpowered by where you are at this point in time. But I think it's that opening codec call which is just burned into my memory. It's when the codec call goes off and David Hayter says, "This is Snake. Colonel, can you hear me?" And Roy Campbell responds with loud and clear, "What's the situation, Snake?" And from then on in, it's like just the voice acting alone in that one little part, it's just absolutely brilliant. But even with how the music was composed for that time, it literally feels like you've been dunked into ice cold water. And you're just like, what the fuck do I do? Like, I know I have to get to the elevator in the back, which is what Snake says. It looks like the elevator in the back is the only way out. And Colonel Campbell says, "Just as I thought, make sure that nobody sees you. If you need to, contact me on the codec. The frequency is 140.85. Nobody else will be able to hear the codec apart from you because it vibrates the small bones in your ears." But just even the way that the camera angle moves around, and if you pay close attention, you can see like condensation coming out of the enemies' masks because they're all wearing balaclavas. And like, these are a threat straight away, these enemies, because they're armed with 5.56ers, which are AR assault rifles. You have nothing on you apart from a scope, probably some thermal goggles. No, not thermal goggles.
You find them later on.
Find them later on. You've got just the bare minimum kind of equipment on you, which harkens back to the days of Metal Gear Solid 3 when like you had to climb up a tree to get your belongings because they got tangled in a branch as you were doing your Halo jump. In this new era, you are coming in via water to rise up onto this land, and you've got nothing on you. But I suppose it's that wonderful transitional cutscene. You manage to escape the dock section, and you go up the elevator, and Snake kind of takes off his goggles, takes out his respirator, the helmet that he was wearing, just kind of basically strips down the stuff that he doesn't need. And then you get that wonderful title card of Metal Gear Solid. But you know what I really loved about just that opening area is you can see credits.
Yeah.
The scriptwriter, Hideo Kojima, directed by Hideo Kojima, art director, all these kind of guys. These names will just appear, so it actually feels like you're playing a movie. Yeah. That had never been done before in gaming, at least to my knowledge. Resident Evil probably may have touched on it, I think. But for this point, it was like you're not only playing a game, but you're immersed in the experience itself. So as you exit the dock level through that elevator, and that's when you see the complex of Shadow Moses. And it's brilliant because you can hear the wind gusting past your ears and the snow is falling down. It's like it feels like you're literally a walking block of ice, surrounded in this foreign area, completely outgunned and outnumbered. You feel alone. You really do feel alone. And even the people who have your back, you can't even see them. So it really feels like the choice is down to the player on how you want to approach this situation. There's a great point where in the middle of the helipad you can actually see the lights crossing in an X kind of axis, and in the middle are chaff grenades, which are very, very useful tools to use against the surveillance cameras in the area, which kind of, once you throw the chaff grenade, these little sprites will go off and the camera's angle will be looking to see what's moving around and that kind of thing. But it also knocks your Soliton radar out as well, which are you going to risk using this? And if you're a first-time player, are you going to risk using it and maybe go around blind? Which is just fantastic. It really is.
Yeah, because as you said, you're without your radar, so while there's no security cameras, there's still guards walking around and they can see you. That section as well in the snowfield does something, again, like in not a lot of games at the time we're doing. It shows Snake has an impact on his environment. If you go over, so when you're facing the facility, the helipad is directly in front of you. You're essentially given three means of access to the facility. You can go right, you can go through the middle, or you can go to the left. Very simple, like a small little playground for you to play in. It's still linear, but you've options. Excellent stuff. You go through the middle, you risk getting seen by the spotlights, but it's a risk reward because you can get the chaff grenades. You can move over to the left. There's a little warehouse with some other items in it. Again, another security camera, but it also allows you to get to a vent which you can crawl in through. What most players, I think, do is go to the right, because then you head up to the upper balcony area at the front of the facility and sneak in that way. Thing is, if you go to the right, you're walking on snow. You leave footprints. In other games, nice little detail, doesn't really matter. In this game, if a guard walked past your footprints, they will see them and be like, wait.
Footprints are these?
Exactly. And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
First time I played that, I was blown away. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Oh no. And it's great because there's risks and rewards for going whichever way you end going. So yeah, as you said, then that's your first that's the first real stealth sandbox in the game.
Yeah.
When you first reach the whole facility underground, there's a minor little taste of the stealth while you wait for the lift to come down and everything. But this is the first real gameplay experience, and it's like, here you go, figure out how you're gonna get it. Love it.
And even when you said like the Solid Snake has the impact on the environment around them, just going back to the point that you made about the footprints, if you're really quick about this though, if a guard is kind of backtracking you can hide behind another structure and knock on the actual thing itself to bait the guard towards where the knocking came from, while you dart off and get out of his line of sight. And you can actually see the soldier's line of sight in your Soliton radar. They're done in like blue cones. So it gives the player like a brief window on how they're going to approach their situation, how they're going to make their escape, how they're going to. You can almost kind of having played the game so many times that I can kind of bait the guards into which way I want them to go.
Yeah.
But for first-time players, it was like, what the fuck do I do? Like, and how do I go about doing this?
Well, that's the thing as well, is in other games up to that point, if you press up against a wall, your character just kind of either awkwardly keeps walking or will just stop. In Metal Gear Solid, you push up against the wall. It changes the camera angle as well in a lot of circumstances. It allows you to peek around corners. As you said, it allows you to knock. So it's another gameplay mechanic that you have complete control over that allows you to influence the environment and the enemies that you're up against. And it's such a brilliant idea because, yeah, most movies you've seen up to that point where someone is sneaking around, they'll be pressed up against the wall, they'll be kind of leaning. So it's a logical thing for your character to be able to do.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, I mean the camera angles alone in this game itself, like they really make the experience that much more kind of engrossing, I find. Like, because a lot of it can be top down where you just see Snake kind of moving around, you're looking at the top of his head. But when he's pressed up against the wall, the camera will suddenly shift into either looking directly at him and you can see behind him and all these kind of things, which is, you can really tell that the developers, they really went above and beyond to make the game look as stylistic as possible. But going on the point that you mentioned there, Shepard, the way that there's 3 points of entry, as you said, most players will go up to the right, which is what I did as well. And when you're going in through the underground vent, immediately it goes into first person, which again, you're basically looking through Snake's eyes, but because the area is so tight and small, like you feel as you're crawling through, like, where am I going? Like, what? I can barely see my hand in front of me at this stage. But what's interesting is your codec call will go off, and this is where we're actually reintroduced, I should say, to McDonald Miller, who was Kazuhira Miller in Metal Gear Solid, Ground Zeroes, Phantom Pain, and Peace Walker. We will touch on this character later on, but the first time the name McDonald Miller contacts you is in this part, and he says, "Snake, this is McDonald Miller. Campbell told me about the situation. Thought I could be of some help." And he's like your survival expert. So in this portion of the vents, you'll say rats usually go towards the direction of sunlight or the direction of light or something like that. And as you're crawling through the vent, you can actually see these little rats scurrying around, and it's kind of a little cute thing. When they look at you, this little exclamation point will go above them. But if you follow the rats out, they will lead you then into the main, I suppose, foyer of this this grander structure. But essentially, we're looking for a prisoner there, a man by the name of Donald Anderson, who is also known as the DARPA chief, and we've been told that he has information based on the more shadier things that are going on in this weapons research bureau, along with information on the terrorists that are taking over the place. So we essentially have to get him out, which we do. We meet up with McDonald Miller in the basement. Well, not in the basement area. I think it's like level B1 or something like that. There's 3 stories to this place. So you meet McDonald. You meet
Donald Anderson.
You meet Donald Anderson. You drop in through his cell from up in a grate, and him and Solid Snake have a bit of a back and forth about what's going on. And
this is where Snake discovers. But this is where Snake discovers essentially that Metal Gear. Is in, because at this point Snake doesn't know the actual capabilities of the terrorists in the facility. All he's been told is they want to launch a nuke, stop them, and save the 2 hostages, which are Donald Anderson and another character who we meet shortly, Kenneth Baker. And this is the moment where Snake is like, wait, Metal Gear? They have a Metal Gear here? God damn, like fucking Metal Gears.
But isn't it funny that the DARPA chief then says, how do you know what Metal Gear is? And Snake says, we've had a couple of run-ins in the past. You know, which was a very wry kind of comment, which you didn't necessarily have to play the 2 previous games before you played Metal Gear Solid 1. You just know that Snake has had a run-in with the Metal Gear archetype and things like that.
Well, I think this game is almost designed to be an entry point as well, because a lot of people didn't have an MSX, but the PlayStation 1 was a massively popular console. So they were like, we still want to continue the story. We want to continue Solid Snake, his arc, but we don't want what happened before to be erased from the character's history. So you have other characters make comments, and there's little anecdotes throughout, like any codec conversations you have. Like if you call McDonald Miller, he'll fill you in on some information, or they'll talk about like the previous missions. Or if you call Colonel Campbell on the codec, same thing. So I think it does a really good job of bridging old and new while still being an entirely self-contained story.
This is the point, I believe, at the end of the conversation, that Donald Anderson actually gives Snake a key code or a pass. It's like a card that
the PAL card.
The PAL card, that it can open doors with by the user's own electronic magnetic field, which is kind of amazing, because I don't think they had the technology to animate Snake opening doors, so it literally the door would just slide open once you had this thing equipped. But you need to have it equipped. And right as Snake says, okay, I'm going to get you out of here, and the DARPA chief says, wait, before we go, you don't have any other pass cards on you by any chance from like your bosses or anything? And Snake says, no. And the DARPA chief says, are you sure you don't have any? And Snake says, I just said no. And the conversation kind of goes ahead, and the DARPA chief says, wait, hang on, what about the Pentagon? And Snake says, Pentagon? And right before the DARPA chief can actually answer, he has a heart attack in front of Snake. He dies in front of Snake. But it was so... It comes out of nowhere. But how there was almost like this sepia kind of filter on the camera, and how it was shaking. And he's lunging out to Snake to help him, and he's crying in this agony, and Snake doesn't know what the fuck is going on, and we as the player don't know what's going on. It was just...
It's creepy almost. And it's one of those moments as well where some doubt is cast as to if Snake has been given all the information, because the DARPA chief is so inquisitive and almost like curious for someone who's like, he should just be like, I want to be rescued. But he's fishing for information. You're like, no, I'm getting you out of here. And when he has his heart attack, he accuses Snake. Like, you... Like, he's kind of pointing the finger and saying, well, why would Snake give you a heart attack? How would Snake give you a heart attack?
How would that be possible?
It's a really clever setup for the twist down the line, which we'll get to.
We will.
And of course, after his death, and this is, I'm going to inject a personal anecdote into this next section, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
After this, the door to the cell opens, and a woman is there, or a person in full terrorist gear.
She was the prisoner next door as well, wasn't she?
Yeah, but you don't see her face at this point.
You don't see her face.
She's knocked out the guard and taken their gear, and she's pointing the gun at you. And she says, you killed the chief, you bastard. And that right there, So, to bring it back a few years, when I was a kid and I played this game for the first time, I really shouldn't have been playing this game when I was a kid. But my stepbrother came over to our house with his PlayStation and his, big double disc box of the original Metal Gear.
Oh man, what a work of art that was.
Yeah. And he brought it over and said, "Oh, I want to play this game with you." And we were like, me and my brother were like, "What? What's this? What are you talking about?" And we booted it up. We started playing through all the stuff we've talked about so far. And it was that moment when Meryl calls you a bastard. Nowadays, I think nothing of that kind of thing. When I was a kid, this came out in 1998. I must have played it, or I think I played it in 1999. I was 8. And being called a bastard in a video game was the moment I was kind of like, oh, this isn't for kids. That was the moment I connected with video games on a new level, where I realized they're not just entertainment.
Crash Bandicoot kind of thing.
Yeah, like I had played up to that point. I'd played like Super Mario, Crash Bandicoot, Legend of Zelda, all games I still love to this day.
But this was different.
Yeah, this was the one that was like, this is a story. These are important characters in a dangerous world.
Yeah.
There are consequences. It was like the veil had been lifted. Not to sound pretentious, the veil had been lifted, and I realized, oh man, there's so much more video games can be than what I know so far. Because I don't really played adventure games or platformers. It was all I knew. I hadn't played any like role-playing games. I hadn't played tactical espionage action. So that was kind of the next step forward for me. Was like, okay, this is a game changer. This is opening up a whole new world of possibilities and things for me to explore. And I will always thank Metal Gear Solid for that.
Yeah.
For showing me what video games can be.
Yeah. I think the title itself blended like that really intense maturity in its themes, but there's also some like the game doesn't take itself too seriously either. Like one of the disguises you can use is a cardboard box. So it doesn't take itself too seriously, but
you won with the box.
but I suppose that's where it blends that kind of, it blends the two almost seamlessly together. But yeah, when you were hearing even like even there would be some points in the game where it's like Snake would say, "You son of a bitch," or and as the player, like even as a young player, be like, "Whoa, I didn't even realize that games could go this depth, or they could go this far in terms of their maturity." But you have that encounter with Meryl, who has disguised herself as the guard, and what I love about that part is this is so previously in the helipad area, you come across a SOCOM pistol. It's in the back of a truck, and this is kind of like your first kind of introduction to like the firefight kind of aspect between Snake and enemies, because before that you were kind of sneaking past, and now's your chance to get a bit of revenge. But Meryl freezes, and she's holding like a rifle, and you can
what are you waiting for? Shoot!
You can actually see that she's shaking. As enemies are coming in, she's freezing, and Snake is barking at her like, just fucking fire the damn thing, which does come into a conversation later on between Snake and Meryl. But after you have that sequence, this is where we run into our first encounter with one of the Foxhound members, and it's a man by the name of Psycho Mantis, who had his first introduction in the Phantom Pain with Eli. So it was once again kind of retconning that relationship bridge between Liquid Snake and Psycho Mantis. This is our first interaction, and we see him. He kind of floats. He's wearing a gas mask. He's very telekinetic in his kind of attributes. But we also see a flashback, and the leader of the Foxhound unit is a man by the name of Liquid Snake, and he turns to another member of the Foxhound unit, of whom we will get into, and he says, "You fool, you killed him." But in this kind of restraint is the DARPA chief. So how can the DARPA chief be here when we've just spoken to the DARPA chief? It didn't make sense to me the first time I played the game, and then it's revealed later on as to what happened. So moving on, I suppose, from that encounter that you have with Psycho Mantis, and after you've dealt with Meryl, it's now time to go and hopefully rescue the second hostage, who is down in the basement section.
Yeah, he's the head of Arms Tech,
Arms Tech, yeah.
which is another company working with the DARPA and the Shadow Moses facility to create Metal Gears.
Yeah.
The interesting thing as well is you're told that he's been placed in an area that's walled off. They had cemented up holes in the walls to keep him blocked away. And the DARPA chief, before he passes, tells you they haven't had a chance to paint over them yet. So look for the walls that are a different color to the rest. And that's like an interesting way to get you to use the first person view in the game, because generally the game is played from a somewhat isometric viewpoint. You know, you're running around, the camera's kind of up here looking down from above. So this is about, you know, using your perspective changes. You know, you're running around this square room with a bunch of miniature rooms in it, each with different card key numbers on them. So this is a place you'll actually come back to on more than one occasion. And there's traps, there's booby traps, you know, there's holes in the floors and there's guards wandering around and everything's great.
Yeah.
So you obviously have to find, using your own ability to detect, like you're looking around. It's not like nowadays where you say, like, you know, your detective vision like in the Arkham games. No, you use your own eyes to find what you're looking for. Or
you can also knock on part of the wall, and if it's hollow, it'll echo.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great little touch. Just to make it feel more like an actual world that you're exploring and playing in. So yes, eventually you break through and you find Kenneth Baker, head of Arms Tech, and he's strapped to a metallic pillar in the middle of this room with strings, almost like a spider web, spread out to the rest of the room. Snake goes to rescue him, and he explains, "Don't touch me. I'm rigged to explode."
Yeah,
all of this here.
C4s dotted around the place, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's just really like, oh, okay, what am I supposed to do here? And that's when possibly the best character in the entire franchise, and I will fight anyone who disagrees, shows up. Revolver Ocelot. You're pretty good.
Man.
And his introduction is top tier.
He's just swinging his revolver.
He shoots.
He shoots first, doesn't he?
He shoots Snake first, and Snake has this cool kind of, he jumps back in slow motion while the bullet ricochets, and he lands, and that's when Revolver Ocelot gets into his whole, I'm brilliant, I'm Revolver Ocelot, I love it to bits, he's so campy and amazing. And he, you know, the whole time, as you said, he's spinning his guns. I'll show you why they call me Revolver. You know, it's great. He's fantastic. And the fight with him.
Just to make that point on Revolver Ocelot's kind of appearance, like having gone from playing Metal Gear Solid 3, where he's introduced as a rookie, like a rookie major, and coming up to this part in his lifespan, he's like a completely different person.
He's a cowboy.
He really is. He really is. But that boss fight alone that you have, where you're kind of chasing him around this this structure that Kenneth Baker is held in, if you go into that structure, like if you try to cut across, like it'll just blow up and game over. But you have to wait for Revolver Ocelot to reload, because he's bouncing his revolver around the place. The bullets are ricocheting across the structure, and like it can hit you from any angle. So it's a really tense boss fight, isn't it?
It's one of those situations, I think, where restrictions breed creativity. So you essentially have this small square corridor you can run around in with the boss. As you said, you can't cut across the middle. You have to be careful of your own shots, because you can shoot the chief. You can shoot the CEO of Arms Tech.
Yeah.
So you have to cleverly maneuver while keeping Ocelot in your sights, because you want to know where he's shooting. And as you said, you have to wait for him to have to reload. Now, I think they have a little thing on the top of the screen that shows you how many bullets he has left.
Yeah, exactly. So you can kind of plan your attack ahead. Like, okay, he's got one shot left, and I know he's going to reload after this, and he'll slow down. I can go around the other side and get him from behind while he's reloading. And
you nearly have to bait his shots, you know, like you want him to take these shots, because that opens up your window to attack. So it's this back and forth dance of you kind of running away but trying to get him to shoot at you, and then you like laying into him as quickly as you can. Really clever boss fight.
Do you know what? You just mentioned a word there, dance, right? And I know we've discussed this one game many times, and you're probably blue in the face of me of me referencing it. You know exactly what I'm going to talk about. It reminds me of the boss fight in Hollow Knight when you're fighting against the Mantis Lords. Like, I remember texting you or giving you a voice note, and I was like, look, I've used the Hadouken move and I can't do this. Like, what am I doing? And he said, no. pay attention to the patterns that's going on, and once you get it, it becomes a beautiful dance. And that's what this boss fight is. It's almost like a tango of death between these two operatives. It's fucking brilliant, like.
Yeah.
But right at the end of that boss fight, Revolver Ocelot is hiding behind a pillar. He's loading up his gun and he says, "You're pretty good, just what I expected from the man with the same code name as the boss."
Yeah.
And
I
it's
love
like
that.
it kind of sprinkles just a little touch of something going on there with the story. And Ocelot reloads his gun, and right as he comes out into view, you see this shadow coming down, almost like an invisible shadow, but you can see the outline of something, and something cuts Ocelot's hand off, and he's like, "My hand, what?" And this cybernetic ninja wielding a katana comes forth, and it's just brilliant, because now it's like, who the fuck is this guy? Because you would, as you were going into through the vent area, as you were going into the main floor, you can actually eavesdrop on a conversation that two soldiers are having, saying that there's an infiltrator in the base, and you're thinking, shit, it's me. Did I trigger something in the helipad, or did somebody see me? And it's like, oh, he's already, the soldier's saying he's already killed 20 of our men or something like that. And it's like, wait, there's another person in here besides me. Who is this guy? And he appears in front of Ocelot. But Snake is like, he holds his gun up to him and says, "Who are you?" And the ninja turns around, and you can see the glowing red. It's like a focal point in this ninja's mask. And he says, "I am like you. I have no name." But Kenneth Baker says, "That exoskeleton." And right then and there, I think you see the ninja screaming, or
he kind of loses his mind a little
loses
bit.
his sanity a little bit, doesn't he? But it's kind of like, is that an android, or is that a person?
There's another, actually, in reference to that. There's something Ocelot says before he runs away. Obviously, he's handless now. He says to Greyfox, to the ninja, just before he leaves, he's like, "Can't you even die right?" Which I think is a reference to what happened in Zanzibar land with between.
I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, it's this great little moment where it's like, "Can't you even die right?" And of course, it is a reference to Snake's history with the character, which again you don't know at the moment, because you don't know who's inside the cybernetic suit.
Yeah.
And
so it kind of links these two characters together, then, doesn't it? Just that one little line of dialogue that Ocelot says, "Can't you even die right?"
Yeah, it's just like, natural as well. It's really natural dialogue, which Metal Gear doesn't always have. Because it's dialogue between Ocelot and the ninja. Nothing to do with Snake. Snake is an observer in this. They're not trying to fill him in on what's going on. They're just like, you and me.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
We know each other. Yeah.
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 Of course, then after the ninja loses the plot and runs away, Snake has this conversation with Kenneth Baker, and explains, like, "Oh, I'm here to rescue you." And Kenneth Baker asks, "Well, what about the DARPA chief?" And, "Oh, well, the DARPA chief's dead." So the conversation goes on for a little bit, and you get a bit more information about what was happening at the facility, how Kenneth Baker and Armstech were involved, what the DARPA chief was doing, all that kind of stuff. And he eventually gives you an optical disc, which he says holds all of the data on the Metal Gear tests, which that's kind of important. Snake really wants to hold on to that. He really should hold on to that.
He really shouldn't let anybody take that off him.
Yeah, for sure. And then that's when Heart Attack number 2 strikes.
And this is where Snake is like, "You know what? Fuck this. I'm getting onto the Colonel."
Yeah,
and he's like, "Colonel, did you see what just happened? Now he's dead too." And the Colonel's like, "I don't know I honestly don't know." And Snake is like, "Don't lie to me."
Yeah.
So Snake is now, I think at this point, he's kind of questioning, like, what the fuck is really going on here? Is it as simple as, like, I'm just going to get these hostages out and stop these terrorists? There's something else going on here.
Yeah.
But I think, isn't this the point now when you have to get into the grander part of the facility? And in order to get out there, you need to get in contact with an agent.
Yes, a new recruit.
A new recruit, so to speak, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, this confused me, right? So... And it probably confused, I'd say, 99% of the players out there the first time they played it. So you've been told that there's this new recruit, and they were captured in Shadow Moses. And it turns out it was the prisoner next door in that area where the DARPA chief, Donald Anderson, was held. But Snake is the one who says, "It's like, how do I get in contact with this person?" And the colonel says, "Oh, I'm pretty sure their number should be on the back of the CD box." And then the conversation stops there.
Yeah.
Shepard, I swear to Christ, right? I went back into every single one of those rooms that I could get into with the car key.
Yeah.
And before you get to Kenneth Baker's boss area, or the area that he's in with the Ocelot boss area, I went back to the DARPA chief's cell. His body is not there, by the way, anymore. I went into just all the little nooks and crannies. I went so far as to going back into the dock section and seeing did I miss anything. Where is it?
You know what I did before we talk about that? I thought it was the back of the optical disc box.
I did that as well.
I went rifling through my inventory, like, is it here? Where is it?
And there's actually a little computer in one of the parts in the cell area. And I was trying to insert it in there, and I was like, what the fuck do I do? Like, how do I find this?
This is when he truly wanted to break the fourth wall. Eric Kojima did.
Yeah, not the first time he did it in this game either.
No, not at all. But this was actively including something that wasn't physically in the game story. So it's on the back of the game box.
Literally.
Which you don't even think, like, first thing a lot of players do when they buy a new game, they'll look at the back of the box. Oh, that's pretty cool. And one of the screenshots is the number that you need to call.
140.15. It's burnt into my head now. It's burnt.
It's honestly, I kind of love it. It's kind of
brilliant. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant because it's again the whole story of Metal Gear Solid 1 and even going into Metal Gear Solid 2 and some parts in the fourth game is it's immersing the player in the story, but giving them the opportunity outside of the story to continue the narrative. Do you know what I mean? So if you never looked at the back of the box, you never would have found Meryl's number.
Or if you're a poor sod who got a digital copy of it in the modern age, you know, like on the PlayStation Network or something like that, you're fucked.
I think you have to go into like the online manual or something like that.
Yeah, I think they have it.
But nowadays we have YouTube and forums that have like dissected this game that can give you all the information you need. But for back in the day, man, this fucking wrecked my noggin. I couldn't figure it out. So you contact Meryl and her and Snake have a bit of a back and forth, and like they're kind of, you know, messing around with each other, and she says, "Wait, you're Solid Snake, aren't you?" And Snake says, "That's what some people call me." And she says, "The legendary Solid Snake, you? Really? That was you?" And she was like, "Oh, look, I'm sorry about before. Like, I just had to make sure that you weren't him." And Snake is like, "Who's him?" And Meryl says, the guy who's running the show here, like the main big bad. You guys are like, you look identical to each other. Again, another little sprinkle going on there. But essentially, after a long conversation where Meryl talks about her upbringing, what made her want to join the army, what made her want to be in the special forces, all this kind of thing. Like, we're not going to dive too much into it. You can check it out on YouTube if you're interested in that codec conversation, which it is actually pretty well written, I must say. So she then opens up the hangar door in the main part of the foyer, and this is where, kind of going back to the point that you made when Snake was being a little cheeky bugger when he said he snuck his cigarettes in through his stomach. To get out through the main hangar, you can actually see these IR sensors dipping up and down, up and down. And if you can't find any thermal goggles, which are in one of the rooms in the main foyer area, you can contact Colonel Campbell, and he'll say, if you have any questions about equipment or anything like that, you should contact our tech expert. I think she is Nastasha Romanenko. Is on the frequency of 141.52. My God, I can remember these codec frequencies much more easier than where I can locate my shoes half the time. But she says that the IR frequencies, you can actually locate them if you blow smoke out at them. So if you can find some way of doing that, by all means, you can go ahead. So you can literally spark up a cigarette and blow the smoke out and see the beams moving up and down.
And also, while you're smoking, your health slowly
starts to go down, which is brilliant. So there's benefits and negatives. Don't smoke, anybody.
Smoke is bad. Okay.
Smoke is bad. Okay. We get out then into the grander minefield of the area. So right over this minefield or over the snowy area, we can see the main part of the structure that we need to get to. Now, this is one part of the game where I fucking freaked out, right? So as you take 2 steps ahead, and your codec immediately goes off, and a frequency will come up. What I really liked about, we mentioned this at the beginning, that when you're in these codec calls, you can see panels. So you'll have Snake on the right hand side, and then the person he's calling or calling him will be on the left hand side, which is a really cool feature. But at this part, it's like static, and the person calling you says, "Snake, watch out! There are claymore mines around that area. Use the mine detector." And Snake is like, "Who are you?" And the person responds, "There's a tank in the distance waiting to ambush you, but to get to there, you'll have to use the mine detector to go through the mines, so you can see where they are." And Snake says, "You're not using burst transmission. Are you nearby?" And the guy is kind of like cutting himself short a little bit. It seems he only has a certain time frame that he can actually speak. And towards the end of the conversation, Snake says, "Wait, who are you?" And the guy responds back with, "One of your fans." Now, when that codec call finished, I remember I was literally holding the controller, and I was like, what the fuck is going on now? There's so much being thrown in at this point, but I don't know what it was about the urgency of that codec call, but it frightened the life out of me when I played it as a kid. Because not only are you told that there's mines in the area, there's a fucking tank waiting for you after that, and it's like, oh, bugger, how do I go about doing this? Like, but it was the urgency in the person's voice, like, "Snake, watch out." You know, it was almost like they were gasping for oxygen or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's at a great point in the game where Snake's trust is already at its limit. You know, he doesn't know if he can trust Campbell or, Naomi
He's
Hunter.
having doubts at this
Exactly,
point.
yeah. The only person he's felt he can really rely on is McDonald Miller.
And to an extent, Meryl as well, because she's relying on him. Because
they're helping each other out. It's not just
she sees him as this legendary soldier who like stopped Metal Gear twice by himself.
Yeah,
and she's like, "I'm working with Snake. I'll do anything to help him." And he's thinking, well, she's a rookie, and I can kind of show her the ropes, but I know I can rely on her because she's decked out in this guard's outfit, so she can get into places around Shadow Moses and relay information to him and things like that. But that one call, man, I don't know what it was. It just fucking freaked me out. Like,
it's this. I think it's that sense of urgency to it. You're like, oh crap, what's going to happen now? And even though you know exactly what's about to happen, you've been told there's mines in a tank. Fuck you.
And isn't this what we're introduced to
the next member of Foxhound?
And he is
Vulcan Raven,
the Icelandic shaman.
He is one of the more interesting members of Foxhound in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Because he is very complex, but also very simple. He has a simple desire. He wants to face someone powerful on the battlefield. But he has such like a storied history as well that you find out once you fight him the second time. He's the only member of Foxhound outside of Liquid, I think, who can fight more than once, isn't he?
Outside of Liquid, yeah. Well, yeah.
Oh no, sorry, Sniper Wolf you fight twice.
Sniper Wolf you fight twice, and we'll get to her later. But he's the only member of Foxhound whose locations change drastically.
Oh yeah. They're two different fights.
And they're two different surroundings that you're in. Like, we'll get to Raven's second boss fight later on. Like, we're going to touch on that now in a moment, or in a brief moment of time. But for me personally, right, and this is just my opinion. The second Vulcan fight that you have, in my opinion, is one of the greatest Metal Gear Solid fights of all time. One of the greatest encounters I think I've ever had in a game. And my personal favorite would be the end from Metal Gear Solid 3. Just because of that long sniper sequence taking place over 3 different areas. It's brilliant. But essentially you're fighting Vulcan Raven in his big tank. You don't really have the manpower to take this thing down, because you don't have any like high powered or big powerful weapons, so you take the thing out with grenades.
Brilliant.
But one of the lines that Raven actually says to Solid Snake is, "Snakes don't belong in Alaska." And yet the leader of the Foxhound unit also has that code name, which I thought was really interesting. But his character alone, like, albeit the first boss encounter that you do have with him can be, it's basically run around, avoid the cannon, avoid the turrets and things like that, and just chuck a bunch of grenades in. But that's not the last time that we see Vulcan Raven. We do meet him again later in the game.
It's almost like he's testing you, like he's not really there to stop you.
It's trial by fire, isn't it?
Yeah, he wants to see if you're worthy. And I think that plays into what you're saying as well about snakes don't belong in Alaska. He obviously puts a lot of stuck in the code names, you know. So like wolf, sniper wolf, a wolf is a hunter. Ravens are bringers of death.
Yeah.
Um,
Octopuses can shift their bodies
yeah,
to suit their surroundings, which kind of touches upon what we're going to talk about later on.
And that's it. Like I think he kind of puts a lot of things into that. The whole naming system, and it means something to him, I think, which is really cool. Obviously, he has a tattoo of a raven on his head, which isn't also a tattoo. That's confusing.
Yeah, it's kind of like war paint or something that he has.
Yeah. But it comes alive.
Yeah,
kind of.
It's more of like a spiritualistical kind of attribute to his kind of overall design, I think. But because he's an Inuit tribes person, like as you said, he puts so much faith into people's I'm going to say their spirit names.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
their spirit animal, yeah.
Spirit animal, essentially, yeah, because that's a big part of his tribes.
His culture, yeah.
His culture and thing like that. So then we come into where the nuclear warheads are actually being held. Now,
this
can fuck itself. This can.
Yeah. So, you get a call, don't you? From, is it Naomi Campbell?
You get a call from
Naomi Hunter.
You get a call from Campbell first, who tells you not to fire off any weapons in this place.
Yeah.
And Snake being like, why? And I think that's when Hunter comes in, Naomi Hunter, and says, you have live ammunition and nuclear warheads. What do you think is going to happen? This is where the stealth mechanics, if you have to put everything that you've been taught and learned, from coming up from the dock section into the helipad into the main foyer of where the DARPA chief and all those kind of things are. Like, if you get caught in here and they send a fire team, it's game over, man. It's game over. You're fucked.
You can't hide anywhere.
You cannot hide anywhere. And even if you equip the gas mask that you can find in one of the backs of the trucks there in the actual foyer itself, it does the square root of fuck all. Because once a gunshot goes off, you might as well just turn the game off and load your progress up. But you're essentially looking for a research scientist by the name of Dr. Hal Emmerich, and he is down in one of the floors in this grand floor. So while you're sneaking around, keeping an eye on your Soliton radar, making sure that nobody sees you, you have to pay very, very close attention to what's going to be happening later on, and this area kind of kickstarts it. But essentially, you have to shoot a Nikita guided missile, which is one of the weapons that you get in the, I'm going to call it like the weapons warehouse where Baker's area was.
Yeah, you have to go back and get it and come back to the...
Yeah, this is one of the places that you will traverse. So I've got a point I want to make about this actually, but it is coming up.
Yeah.
It's the one part in the game where I was like, are you fucking kidding me? But it's a small little gripe I have with the game, and I will get to it. So you find the Nikita rocket missile. You kind of have to guide the rocket through these kind of curving corridors in this science laboratory. There's gas that's been pumped into the area, and you have to take out the generator, which knocks on the air filter, which means you can go through the area. But this kind of felt very video gamey for me. What I mean by that is there's turrets, camera turrets loaded in these different areas.
Yeah.
So I found an awful lot of the time I was wasting ammunition during this point, trying to take out the turrets first before I get to the generator. You know?
Yeah. For sure.
Like it's a small little gripe I have with it. One of very few with this game. And then we get to this frightened the shit out of me, actually.
Yeah, same.
So
I know exactly what you're about to say, and it scared the piss out of me.
It is a cutscene, right? When before you get into this area, into this corridor, you go through after coming out from the area you just cleared with the air purifier. You're in this kind of like decontamination room, and mist is going off, and it's kind of cleaning you down. But from the other side of the door, you can hear just like these sharp kind of cuts and the slicing of air happening and people screaming, and it's like, the game is really clever though, because it waits about 10 seconds before it lets you in. It allows the player to kind of process what's been happening. But as you go through, it's a long corridor and there's bodies everywhere. And they're cut to shreds. There's bullet holes in the walls. There's blood splattered everywhere. And Snake is like, it looks like they were cut with some kind of blade. And for the player, it was like, oh shit, is this who I think it is? Is this our friend from the Baker boss fight? But
Yeah.
Kojima did something very clever here, and it's something that I found out in my own research. It's wild. It's kind of like this traditional Japanese music kind of going on in the background. There's like stringed instruments playing in the background to give that sense of like an otherworldly kind of demonic aesthetic to where you are. But in the background, you can hear those are the names of subway stations in Tokyo, and they're sped up. So it sounds like somebody is muttering some kind of demonic chant, like, which I thought was really clever, because when you hear it first, it's like, what the hell is going on here? But one of the soldiers comes out from around the corner, and he says, "It's a ghost," and he collapses and dies. I didn't want to continue on with the game. It actually took me a long time to continue on at that point. I must say,
full horror mode, like it was like, ugh.
I was frozen. I really was. I was frozen with fear. I'm kind of going back onto it when I'm playing it this day. Like I can go through it no problem, but it still holds up. I mean that one little scene alone holds up remarkably well.
Oh yeah. Well, when you round the corner at the end as well, and you see the shadowy invisible outline from before, and a guy kind of like up in the air,
Yeah.
you know, impaled on something, you can't see what it is. It's like, what the fuck am I looking at right now? And I think he throws down the guy's body and then starts walking towards Snake.
Yeah. So what happens there is, I think they might have done that in Twin Snakes, but I haven't.
Oh, that was it. Sorry.
I haven't played too much of Twin Snakes. I know that in the original, that once the guy he's kind of like bent backwards, and he just drops to the floor, and that's when the camouflage, the person in the camouflage comes on, and he opens the door to go find Otacon. But it was like, okay, the ninja is here. What the fuck is he doing here? Like, what's he want now? But you do have that interaction with the ninja and Otacon, who was Hal Emmerich, and the ninja is just saying, "Where's my friend?" And then he turns around and he sees Snake, and it's like, "I've been waiting for this moment, Snake." What is it that say? He says, "Now we shall be trialed as warriors in hand to hand. It's the basis of all combat. Only a fool puts his life into a weapon." So you have that kind of that interaction with the ninja. It's a boss sequence where you're just using circle, circle, circle 3 times, kick, kick, punch.
Yeah, it's similar to the Revolver Ocelot fight where you're kind of waiting for an opening.
Yeah.
And you can't really use weapons against the guy because he'll just deflect them with his sword.
Deflects them with his sword, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it is an interesting kind of melee combat scenario. If you try it, as well as that, Snake has a flip that he can do to people, where he kind of trips them up. If you try and do that on the ninja, he'll like flip over and land.
Yeah.
So he's it's not too complex a fight, but it is quite fun and thrilling in its own way.
Yeah, there's also parts where the ninja will actually use like a stealth camouflage kind of thing and kind of jump to other parts of this huge room that you're in.
Yeah, and you have to find him.
Yeah, like but right towards the end of the boss fight, he starts saying, "I remember this pain," and
hurt me more, Snake.
Hurt me more. Do you remember what it feels like? The heat of the battle, the clashing of bone and sinew. And it's like, Jesus Christ, like it's like the script alone, just in that one part was bloody phenomenal.
Yeah.
But then the same thing happens to the ninja. He starts battering his head against the floor. He starts screaming, and if you get too close to him when he's screaming in his agony, he'll shock you because his suit is going nuts. And then a cutscene happens, and the ninja says, "That felt good, Snake. Do you remember me now?" And Snake has that light bulb moment when he was like, you died. How are you still alive? You died. And the ninja, he gets down on all fours and starts banging his head again, and he's like, the medicine. And he jumps, he goes out of that room completely. And Snake has that conversation with Colonel Campbell, but immediately he says, "It's Grey Fox. Colonel, the ninja is Grey Fox." And Campbell's like, "That's impossible. That can't happen. You know yourself. You killed him in Zanzibar." Naomi Hunter immediately comes in and says, "No, he should have died, but they didn't. They did experiments on him, and essentially kept him in this vegetable state while they were grafting new body components onto him and all this thing, and kept him alive via nanomachines and these and drugs and medication. So essentially, he's more machine than human right now. But now a ghost of Snake's past is now with him in this new experience. I absolutely loved that interaction between these two war buddies.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
Absolutely loved it.
It's
Brilliant.
it's just immensely like tense, and it's a great moment for Snake where his entire world nearly shatters because everything he thought he knew was going on. It's like, well, why is Gray Fox here? Like, what's happening? Like, it's insane. What am I going up against? How could he be brought back from the dead? All these questions are lingering. Now there's another fact that Naomi Hunter knows something. It's
She knows a little bit too much.
yeah, exactly. You're like, oh, what's she up to?
Yeah. Now, playing the game the first time, I think it would kind of go over the player's head because she's like the doctor of the group, so she would know about cybernetic enhancements and things like that.
Yeah, of course.
But the fact that she knew where he died and things like that, and what happened to him, and
yeah, why he's not dead.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's kind of telling, like that she knows a little bit more than what she's letting on, which is kind of a theme in the game. So you meet up with Otacon. He lets you know about Metal Gear, its the development, all this kind of thing. He decides to join you on your quest as a support, as one of the members of your support team, and he can go around the entire building with this quite freely with this stealth camouflage that he does have. So you meet up with Meryl then afterwards, and I believe you have to go through the director's room, and this is where it gets a bit weird.
Oh yeah, this is arguably, I know our favorite fight is the second Vulcan Raven fight. This is arguably the most impressive fight, or the most iconic fight from the game, because you encounter Psycho Mantis, the psychic.
Yeah,
and
but isn't it funny, before you encounter him? Sorry for cutting across it. The genius of having music in a video game and how it sets the tone is very important. And there's some fantastic composers out there who really know how to sculpt a scene just by music alone. In the background of Metal Gear Solid 1, when you're going through the hangar, like it's very there's a lot of kind of percussive kind of synth kind of music going, very on a low kind of key. It's just background music. After you meet Meryl and you go towards where the director's room is, the music changes, but you wouldn't have noticed it unless you've been paying attention to it.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like a funeral dirge or something. No, there's this very off-filtered choir kind of humming in the background, and it kind of it's like spine tingling a little bit, isn't it? It's, like,
it's building up to something, and
it is.
If you're paying attention, you'll get that feeling where you're like, oh, well, what's about to happen here?
And did you notice, though, if you go into the first-person view, you're looking at Snake from Meryl's eyes now?
Yes, yeah. It's a great little touch, because it plays into what's about to happen in the next room with Psycho Mantis, where you find out that Psycho Mantis is controlling Meryl. He causes her to point a gun to her own head and point a gun at Snake and all this. If you actually have to knock her out before you physically encounter Psycho Mantis.
Yeah.
And it's a great, again, a little bit of foreshadowing. If you've been using the first person view up to that point, then you'll really notice it there. You're kind of like, whoa, what? Why am I seeing myself here?
The camera is kind of floating above Meryl's head as well, which shows that Psycho Mantis is levitating over her using this stealth camouflage as well. Doing
his thing.
Yeah,
it's very cleverly done. I really like that, and that whole section I think is one of the highlights of the game. And of course his proper introduction it's iconic. It really is. So he brings you in, and if you're playing on an original PlayStation with a DualShock controller, he'll be like, "Oh, you want to see how psychic I am? Put your controller on the floor. I'll make it vibrate." And it's like, "Wait, what?" And he does it. Controller vibrates. Great little
brilliant
thing. He'll also read your memory card.
Yeah.
And depending on certain games you have saved on your memory card back in the day, he'll be like, "Oh, so you like to play this, or you like to play that? So you like to play Castlevania?" Generally it was Konami franchises.
Yeah. But he also makes a good point that it depends on how often you've actually saved the game.
Yeah.
So if you save too often, he'll say, I can see you've written your progress down too much. Is that the mark of a coward, or are you playing it too safe? And then,
Yes, he says. I remember. I distinctly remember because I'm one of these
okay.
people that saves all the time. He says, "You're a very careful man, the type who kicks his tires before he leaves." Uh,
Oh, brilliant.
I was like, "Oh, I love it! I love it so much." You know,
Brilliant.
I think if you play like very stealthy up to that point, if you're very particular about your sneaking and your saving and all that, that's when he notices, "Oh, you're a cautious man." It's a great. It's almost a reward for how you've been playing the game. I love that. I love that so much.
I know, it's brilliant. It really is. It's such an iconic boss battle, and today it holds up remarkably well. It
Oh
really,
yeah,
it holds up remarkably well.
especially because it incorporates these psychic things into the fight itself. So everyone knows what happens now. You fight him, but you can't hit him.
Mm.
You're like, what's going on? You keep shooting at him, and he keeps dodging side to side. And either you'll figure it out for yourself, or you'll call up Colonel Campbell and be like, "What am I supposed to do here?" And they'll give you an idea that you're meant to move your controller from slot 1 to slot 2.
Oh, I fucking love it.
It's amazing. Now,
I
I've
love
also
it.
heard
So
that,
good. It's so
yeah,
good.
it's clever. And as the fight goes on, he'll begin to read your movements again, and you can swap again.
Yeah.
Uh, I've also heard there's another way to beat him where if you have no save data at all, he can't read you. Um, so I think if your memory card is blank, or maybe if you haven't saved the game up to this point, because he doesn't know what you've been doing.
Oh my God.
I'm not entirely sure on that. I need to test it out, but it's such a clever concept.
That's actually brilliant.
Like, how do
Actually
you even
brilliant.
think of that? It's
How did they think of
fantastic.
this thing? It's
It's
brilliant.
genius.
There's another one I know. Another way you can defeat him is if you haven't done the control port switcheroo and you're taking a bit too long in the boss fight, or you're getting your ass handed to you. Campbell will ring you and say, "Wait a minute, didn't Master Miller or somebody say that Psycho Mantis doesn't like the look of his own face?" Or that kind of thing. And in the actual room itself, you can see busts of these statues that have bandages on them. So if you destroy those statues, his focus will be looking towards them, and that's when you can kill him.
Oh,
It's brilliant.
brilliant. So
Absolutely.
many, like, it's such a clever way to set up a boss with so many different ways to fight them.
Mm,
I
yeah.
love that. And again, it breaks that fourth wall, but in a way that keeps the player engaged, which I think is very clever.
Yeah.
Also, I just want to touch on this as well. After each final boss fight, so say like after you beat the Psycho Mantis in this occasion, or when you fight Sniper Wolf the second time, when you fight Vulcan Raven the second time,
I know exactly where you're going.
they talk to you a bit about their personal history,
Mm.
and you realize they're not just a boss fight. Like, this is a person who has been through tremendous strain and pain and depression, and every single one of them has this, and it's just a really nice touch. I mean, of course, it would be nice to know them before you kick the shit out of them, but this idea as well that, like, okay, I just killed a person. That is a person.
Yeah.
They're not just a roadblock in a video game for me to get past.
Yeah. I think it's that conversation with Mantis as he's lying on his back,
Yeah.
and listening to what he says, and you actually take his mask off as he's talking, and it's horrific because he has, like, part of his mouth is stitched, and his lip is going this way, and his tongue is hanging out this way, and, like, part of his head has been surgically opened, and you can see all this stitching. And he says, the first time I ever used my powers was against my father, and he looked at me like I was a mutant, and it was the first time I saw in his eyes that he wanted to kill me. I was afraid of him, and I think I think Mantis was actually responsible for his mother dying in childbirth.
Yes, yeah, I think that's touched on.
Yeah, it was something that it's put together for the player to kind of piece those events together. But there's something that he says at the end of that boss fight, which he says you can get through there, and he kind of waves his hand towards this secret passage in a book behind a bookshelf, I think it is, and a door opens.
Yeah.
And he says, do you know what? That's the first time I've ever used my powers for good, and it feels nice. And he looks up the snake and he says, before you go, please, will you give me my mask, put my mask back on. And you strap it, and he looks up to Snake and Meryl, and he says, I was inside her head, and she holds a large spot in her heart for you, a very large spot. But I don't know what's going to happen in the future, which leads into the whole the two endings you can get in the game, which I thought
Oh
was
yeah.
a nice touch. But you're right though. It's although these are very cold-blooded, top-tier mercenaries, they're human.
Yeah. Ultimately, they're here not necessarily because they chose to be, and of course, they are people. They did make choices, but their background is a huge influence on where they wound up.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
really like that.
yeah.
It humanizes them a great deal after the fact, but it's better than nothing.
Mm,
Every game kind of after this point would try something similar to an extent. Like you get the same with Dead Cell and MGS2, but they have a bit more agency before their fights, I think. And then
yeah.
you have in MGS4
Beauty and the Beasts.
the Beauty and the Beast core, where I think they dropped the ball on that end because they
I
literally
agree
have
with you.
no personality
Yeah,
until, and then again, you don't even find out their story from them. You find out from another
Reb.
character. Yeah, Drebin. I like Drebin, but that kind of side of that whole thing didn't work for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. So he opens a passage for you to go through, and you meet some wolves along the way through this kind of cave system, and you catch up to Meryl, who's moved ahead, and there's this long canyon, concrete canyon, uh, and Meryl is like, "Oh, I know which way to go. Just follow my footsteps." There's essentially some mines there, so you just follow her around. And after you do,
Oh fuck
there's
my
this
life.
cutscene. This
Oh,
this was the cutscene that
I don't want
scared
to talk
me.
about it. I don't want to talk about it. But we have to talk about it. But I don't
We
want to
do.
talk about it.
So you're
Oh,
standing, Meryl's standing there, and she's like, "Man, we make a really good team. Like we're really cool." And then all of a sudden, you hear a gunshot. Meryl looks down, and her leg just explodes in a volcano of blood, and she falls over. Um, she also gets shot in the arm and is essentially lying there in a pool of her own blood.
oh Jesus
Um,
Christ. You know
so
what got me about that scene, right? Oh,
yeah,
I hate talking about this because it fucking hits me.
yeah.
You don't you the gunshot doesn't happen straight away. It's a target that you see,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
Snake says, "Meryl," and she looks at him and says, "What is it?"
It's
And
the
then
laser target, isn't it?
it's a laser sight, and she looks down and she's like, "Oh shit!" And Snake says, "Meryl, get down!" And then bang, that's when you see her leg, just like you said, fucking exploding, and it reminds me of that scene actually, and I think this is where Kojima took the inspiration from. There's a scene in a movie called Full Metal Jacket
Oh
when towards the end there's a sniper in the distance and he takes one of the platoon members down and is just continuously firing at them. And it's almost like this sniper is trying to bait Snake out because it's Snake that the sniper wants.
yeah,
As Meryl is even trying to reach for her gun, the sniper shoots her arm, and she says to Snake like, "I always wanted to be a soldier, but I'm not even good enough to do that right now." And Meryl says, "The sniper's trying to bait you out. You have to stay where you are." And this fucking got me. She's trying to reach for her gun, and she says, "I can't reach it by myself." And it's like, oh shit, because you're actually powerless to stop this from happening.
yeah.
And she says, like, "Snake, don't forget me. Like, just go on without me. Don't forget me." And that's when Colonel Campbell comes on and shouts, "Meryl!" It turns out that Meryl is his niece, allegedly his niece. That'll be a point.
Oh yeah.
That'll be a point we'll make later on. But he's panicking over the radio, and he says that the sniper's trying to bait you out. It's a classic trick. You're gonna need another weapon to take her out. You're gonna need a sniper rifle, but you don't have one on you right now. And Snake is like, "I promise you, I'll get this sorted. Like, I promise you, I will not let Meryl die."
Yeah.
Now this pissed me off.
I know.
This fucking annoyed me. So, like what I mentioned about Otacon knowing the building and things like that, you ask him where could there be a sniper rifle, and he says, "I think there's one in level B1 of the tanker hold." And Snake is like, "I have to go all the way back there. What the fuck is wrong with you?"
Yeah, all the way back to the start of the game.
And it's only now that I think about it, because Otacon kind of has a thing for Sniper Wolf. Like, they must have been interacting with each other, and she let him feed her wolves and things like that.
Yeah.
Do you think that he was buying Sniper Wolf time to escape, or was this just Kojima saying we kind of need to stretch the game and let's make him go all the way back over here?
I actually think it was their way of getting Meryl out of the battlefield for Snake's encounter with Sniper Wolf.
Oh,
Because when you come back for the fight, Meryl's gone.
yeah, yeah.
I think that was his way of essentially, okay, she's in danger. Snake has to go with Sniper and come back. That gives them time to take Meryl, move her away somewhere else. I think that was probably the idea, as well as you said, kind of stretch the game out. The games at the time weren't very long. Like really, Metal Gear Solid 1, if you know what you're doing, can be completed in like 3 or 4 hours. Not that that's a bad thing, but that's just my personal take. Is it was trying to essentially remove Meryl from the battlefield and then just allow Snake and Sniper Wolf to have their encounter.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you get the sniper rifle anyway after traversing all the way back over there.
Yeah.
You have your brief encounter with Sniper Wolf. Meryl is nowhere to be seen. You go to where Sniper Wolf was, and that's where you're captured essentially. And this is where you come face to face with Liquid Snake, isn't it? In that torture room.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the thing. You wake up, you meet Sniper Wolf, and then you're surrounded by guys and you get knocked out, and you wake up topless, strapped up, in the similar machine to what you saw the DARPA chief in the flashback in earlier on. And Ocelot starts questioning you. So Snake gets electrocuted, and you have to mash the triangle button, circle button,
yeah,
as fast as you goddamn can.
Yeah.
And this is the moment of the game that can result in 2 drastically different endings.
Yeah.
So if you fail, Meryl is dead.
Yeah.
You do not see her again for the rest of the game except for her body.
Yeah.
If you succeed, Meryl survives.
Yeah.
And that affects who accompanies Snake during the kind of end sequence of the game. Including driving the escape car later on.
Yeah.
So
it also affects the item that you get in New Game Plus.
Yeah.
You either get the infinite bandana or you get the stealth prototype.
Yeah. A great replayability thing as well, because it's not just, it's a different story beat at the end of the game. It's, I get a new item, so you're kind of encouraged to try both, and then that way on another subsequent playthrough you have both items. It's very clever.
Yeah.
So now you're in a cell. You've been stripped of all your gear, and you don't know how you're supposed to get out of here. It's kind of a dire situation. In your cell is the drastically decomposed body of the DARPA chief, and bodies don't decompose that quickly.
Not only after a few hours.
No, that's days minimum.
That's days, probably a week.
Could have been.
Yeah.
And it's a clever, again, sprinkling of information here. Wait a minute, what? Why is he so dead?
Yeah.
He only died like a few hours ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't remember if this is where you find out that he's not the DARPA. Well, this is the DARPA chief, but the DARPA chief you met earlier wasn't the DARPA chief.
No, it's later on in the actual Metal Gear hangar, I believe. It's the conversation that Ocelot and Liquid are having that you're eavesdropping in on.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. This is also the part where Otacon turns up with a handkerchief smelling of Sniper Wolf and a bottle of ketchup. It's like,
thanks, Otacon.
Thanks, man. I'm starving. Yeah, nice one.
You're invisible.
But essentially what you can do is you can lie on your stomach and equip the ketchup, and it spills out in blood. And
it's very clever. That's an opportunity for you to escape. You can also annoy the shit out of the guard by knocking on the door constantly.
Yeah, you can fuck him up a bit, can't you? And this is Johnny, and we met his
Akiba.
Yeah, we met his grandfather in Metal Gear Solid 3, and
we'll meet him again in 2 and 4.
Oh, of course.
Love it. So yeah, because he has the shits and he keeps running off to the toilet. So it's funny because this is a weird little moment in the game where there's like several interactions you can have with this guard. Like if you keep knocking at the door, if you do the ketchup bottle, if you hide under the bed, he looks at you through the window and is like, what are you doing? What are you playing at?
Yeah.
Because like, at this point you don't know what to do. So you're trying a bit of everything to see what works. Eventually, if the blood bottle trick doesn't get you out, Gray Fox rescues you from the cell.
Yeah.
And you get out, and your
equipment is in a box.
Yeah, it's like not far away, so you're re-equipped very quickly.
Yeah. And
what's cool as well is this torture room brings you back out into the first facility that you were in earlier on. You were actually only like, you walked past this door earlier on.
You couldn't open it. Away from getting into it.
Exactly. I love that touch because it connects everything together. It also makes sense why you saw that flashback when you did, because it was so close to where
Brilliant.
your DARPA chief died.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant.
The
Brilliant.
not real one. Yeah,
The
great
not
touch.
real one. Brilliant. Brilliant. It kind of links the levels together, which is great.
Yeah, it makes it feel like a proper building and
Yeah,
facility. And
proper facility.
yeah.
I think now isn't this the moment that when we're going to skip ahead now to you have that you have to get to the radio communications tower, which is where the it's at the base of that tower where Sniper Wolf was.
Yeah.
You
So you
have
make your way all the way back again.
yeah you have to literally you go all the way back and all the way forward and all the way back.
Yeah.
But you have your boss encounter there with Liquid Snake in Behind D.
Behind D.
Interestingly enough, though, is like Liquid Snake will say brother, and Solid Snake's like, why are you calling me brother? Who the hell are you? I don't know who you are. And it kind of leads on to like everything will come full circle at the end of the game. There's a part, actually, I'm almost certain it's this part where
it's after you've rappelled down the side of the building after the fight with the Hindy, because
Yeah.
there's two towers, aren't there?
There's two of them.
Communications towers.
Yeah.
You go up one, fight Liquid, then you go down, and you have to go back up the other one or back down the other one.
It's one of the two of those. Yeah.
Yeah, you rappel some of the way down, and you work your way over to the other one.
Yeah. You need to swing over to the other one at one stage.
Yeah. That was it. Oh, yeah. Great set piece.
Do you know what got me about
really
that?
Cool section.
That sequence though is when you have to you go into one of where the elevator is.
Oh.
And the wait warning goes off, and Snake is like, "What?" So as you're going up this other part of the communications tower, Otacon goes, "Snake, I just kind of want to run something by you," and Snake is like, "What is it?" He said, "Well, I went back to my lab to see if I could get my hands on the another of the stealth prototypes that you could use. There's 6 suits in total, and I'm wearing one of them, so that should mean that there's 5 left." And Snake says, "Look, this isn't basic arithmetic. I understand what you're saying." He says, "No, you don't get it. Like the suits are missing." And Snake is like, "Okay." And Snake says, "Otacon, the wait warning just went off for me there. And did the wait warning go off for you?" And Otacon is like, "That's something else that bothered me. That like the wait warning went off that that it's an excess of 500 pounds or something like that."
Yeah.
And Snake kind of looks down. He goes, "How much do you weigh?" And Otacon is like, "About 225, but that would mean that there's at least 5 other people in there at the moment." And then it's like the screen goes right up to his face, and he's like, "Look out, Snake! The guys who stole the prototypes are in there with you."
Oh, it's so fantastic, because then you're like fighting 5 invisible dudes. You're like, oh my god!
It's the build up as well. That music, brilliant, brilliant.
So well done, so well executed.
Love it.
It's such a good game.
So well done. So I think we should skip ahead now to you have the final boss encounter with Sniper Wolf.
That's a great boss fight.
It is great. It's very, very well done, because she's following you by the air, like it's carrying your scent, you know. So she's such a skilled sniper that if you move a certain way, or if you're just ducking out, or if a part of you can be seen, she'll pick you off immediately. Otacon is kind of like saying, "No, I don't want you guys to fight," because he kind of has a thing for Sniper Wolf now. He also says the Snake beforehand, like, can love bloom on the battlefield and all this kind of thing.
Love can bloom anywhere, even on a battlefield.
Exactly. But like what you mentioned with Psycho Mantis, she goes into this beautiful monologue where she says that she was basically born on the battlefield, and that her first memory was watching her family and her comrades dying around her, and that bullets were her lullabies, essentially, which I find is a beautiful line. And she says, "And then he came, Salah Hadin," which was a code name for Big Boss. As he was fighting in this conflict, he took her and brought her to America, or he took her and brought her to one of the Outer Heavens or another complex that he had, and raised her as his child of war.
I think that feeds into a really interesting theme in the game, of the sins of the father, you know. So Snake is still, even after having fought Big Boss previously, he's dealing with the consequences of Big Boss's actions even now. That obviously feeds into his relationship with Liquid. Then you have Meryl's relationship with Campbell, since the father.
Yeah.
Then, in addition to all of that, what was it? Otacon. He built Metal Gear to essentially like atone for his own father's mistakes.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, you know, every character in some way is paying for the mistakes of history.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good theme that's really well explored in this game.
Yeah, they're dealing with literally like what came beforehand.
Yeah, the fallout of other people's decisions.
Exactly, and inherently how they inherited those bad decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
So, essentially, Sniper Wolf says that she's lung shot. She knows that she's not going to make it, and kind of in a mirroring way, not to the most emotional extent, but Solid Snake puts her out of her misery, much like Naked Snake put the boss out of her misery. I thought that was a nice little kind of retcon, like a nice little mirror image there.
And he places the hanky that Otacon gave him over her face.
Yeah.
And you can see the blood kind of pool.
Yeah.
In the it's very sorrowful. Like the landscape as well, especially for the PS1, it's this beautiful snowfield. Gorgeous imagery.
The wolves come to her and
they howl
and they howl at the snow and things like that. It's a
brilliant.
It's a beautiful scene. So then I suppose kind of coming towards the end of the game itself,
there's still plenty as well though, because you work your way through a smelting plant and then a freezer. The freezer is where you have your next encounter with Vulcan Raven.
Yeah.
So this is, as you said, it's your favorite fight in the game. He's like, right, I'm ready to challenge you, and he's this big fucker. Like, you hadn't seen him in all of his grandeur before because he was in a tank. So now he's up there and he has this gigantic minigun with an ammo silo essentially strapped to his back. And much like a lot of the other boss fights, the environment is a fairly simple layout. You know, like with Otacon, it was just the 4 corridors. With Vulcan Raven, it's just a warehouse, a freezer warehouse with a bunch of containers and corridors in between. But it's so well designed as a fight. It tests your skills, everything you've learned up to this point. You know, you have to be sneaky, but you have to be quick and dangerous, and it's so well designed overall. I love it.
Yeah, and I think this is where you kind of have to use everything that you've been kind of picking up along the way in terms of like what weapons to use.
Yes.
Do you lay traps of Semtex or Claymores? Are you going to use the Stinger missile on him? Are you going to use the Nikita guided missiles?
I use the Nikita.
I did as well, as a matter of fact. Yeah. But you kind of have to you're gonna have to kind of bait him in a certain way because you're trying to hit the silo on his back.
Yeah. You can't hit him from the front because he'll shoot down. If you fire a missile, for example, he'll shoot down the missile.
Yeah.
So you have to be real sneaky and clever with how you take him on.
You have to take into consideration the camera angles when your back is up against one of the containers. You have to take into consideration that you might leave footprints around all these very, very genius ways of going against the boss. Really, really, really amazing.
Yeah, very well designed.
Doesn't he mention towards the end of that boss fight, like as he's kind of kneeling down and he knows he's fucked, all of his pet ravens start gathering around him, and he says something along the lines of, "Hear me, Snake. Your sons and your sons' sons will forever be tainted by war." And
then he gets eaten.
Yeah, the ravens peck him alive, which is actually, it's called a sky burial. Yeah, it's quite a traditional way of burial. They would leave the body out, and they would let the ravens peck at them because they're the carriers of the soul of the soul.
It's like he's returning to nature.
He's returning back to the earth. Like that's
really interesting. And all that's left is his gun at the end, which you can't take, unfortunately.
And a huge pool of blood at the end.
Yeah.
Isn't this the part when you're going down into where Rex's hangar is that McDonald Miller gets in contact with you and says, "Snake, it's about Naomi Hunter," and he kind of sprinkles in the fact that she could be a spy.
Yeah, he's essentially sowing distrust between you and the people you're supposed to be working with. Yeah, which is clever.
It is,
when you know what's coming.
Exactly. But he says something along the lines of that her story just doesn't add up. That like she said that her grandfather was Japanese in a brief conversation, and they worked alongside Edgar Hoover or something like that
Yeah, yeah.
as one of his aides, and immediately Miller gets on and says, "When was that?" And she said the year, and he's like, oh, "Okay, and what was he like as a person? Your grandfather?" "Oh, I don't know. I barely met him." And Miller's like, "Okay."
Mm,
So there's kind of like a little distrust issue going on with your support network, especially like Miller at this point now is kind of he's more vocal now about because a lot of the time when you ring him up, he'll just tell you about this is how you go through this part of the layout.
yeah,
Be mindful of your surroundings. Now he's kind of getting a bit more involved in like the social circle going on,
yeah.
which I found was a bit strange when I first played the game. It's like you've been quiet all this time. Why are you just getting all mouthy now? It didn't
Mm,
make sense to me, but now it does.
yeah, yeah.
So essentially, you go down to where Rex's hangar is. You have that magnificent reveal of this colossus creature, this mechanical abomination, like this walking nuclear weapon. And it's how the camera is constantly has it fixed up towards it, so your focus is on this
Yeah.
at all times.
It's gigantic, and the fact that you essentially scale it
Yeah,
because it has the kind of walkways surrounding it for all the people who would work on it.
yeah,
So you have to climb up and then work your way around and then climb up to the next section, which was I think that was a brilliant idea to really convey the scale of the beast,
yeah.
because it is showing you like, no, you are insignificant compared to Metal Gear Rex.
Like if you thought you were outpowered at the beginning of the game,
Yeah.
look at this fucking thing.
And especially coming from like shortly after the Vulcan Raven fight, where it's a guy that towers over you. Like, man, Vulcan Raven's a big dude. It's like, oh, you ain't seen big.
Yeah,
Welcome to Metal Gear Rex.
yeah,
I think that was a very clever escalation, you know, from okay, big person, big robot,
yeah,
big nuclear robot.
yeah. Like you know straight away, just by even looking at this thing, it's like, how in God's name am I going to take that fucker down?
Yeah,
That's going to be a mission.
yeah. That's when you arrive at the essentially the command center
Yes,
for Metal Gear, and you hear a conversation
yes,
between Liquid and Ocelot about activating Metal Gear.
yeah,
And you have the key card you were told would be able to deactivate Metal Gear in your hand. So Ocelot shoots you, I believe.
yeah. He sees Snake outside the door and fires off his weapon.
And yeah, he shoots the key card out of your hand, so it drops down into kind of a sewage area, and you have to go down and get it back.
Yeah,
That's when you're told, who is it by? You're told by somebody that the key card changes shape.
yeah. I think it's Otacon who says.
Yeah, Otacon informs you that the way to shut down Metal Gear is you're gonna have to insert the card 3 times.
Yeah,
One as a normal key card, one as a frozen key card, and then one as a heated key card. Because the idea is that it's a changeable alloy, essentially based on the temperature. Again, this kind of leads to more backtracking. It's not a high point of the game.
Yeah, it's like when you go into the furnace area to change it to the red card, you can't spend too much time in the frozen area, or else the alloy will change again. And you essentially have to insert the card 3 separate times. So it's kind of like it is a bit more going back and forth.
It's a bit time wasting, which is. Yeah.
You know, there's actually I just want to make a very quick point there. It's actually not the conversation that you listen to between Ocelot and Liquid. That's not the point that it's mentioned that Donald Anderson was Donald Anderson. It's the fight that you have at Raven. He's the one who mentions it.
Right, yes.
Yeah, he's the one who mentions
he reveals that.
Yeah. So like it's now coming into the precipice of the game now, where you just found out that the person who you talked to was not the person who you talked to.
Decoy Octopus.
It was Decoy Octopus, who was also a member of Foxhound. But the reason why Ocelot accidentally killed him during the torture part of the game that he was in, he didn't want Donald Anderson to be talking too much, because those two, Ocelot and Anderson, know each other. And I think it was hinted at that Anderson was about to say who Ocelot really was, and that's when Ocelot killed him by mistake, by over torturing him. So it was just a little side note that I just wanted to mention there.
Oh yeah, very good point.
It is kind of easy to get things mixed up in this game. There's a lot going on. There's a part where you're going through the whole shape memory alloy business, and you have to take this huge kind of elevator up and down to the different levels and things like that. It's in the last time that you do this that Naomi Hunter gets in contact with you, and this is the last conversation that you have with her in the game. And
oh yeah, damn.
yeah, so up to this point now, Colonel Campbell has actually put Naomi Hunter under some kind of for use of a better word, I'm going to say like he's put her on a timeout, and he's
Yeah.
watching her, like she's in the room constantly now, because they're worried that she's leaking information to the terrorists. She does manage to contact you on her own radio frequency, and this is where like everything kind of comes full circle in terms of her character and why she's doing this. Right. Essentially, the shot that she gave you at the beginning of the game isn't to stop hypothermia or to stop your body from freezing. She was injecting you with a prototype pathogen called foxdie, which means that Snake is basically a walking weapon. And anybody who gets in contact with foxdie, if they have a certain blood type, they'll die of a heart attack.
Yeah, it's a targeted
Targeted
virus
thing, yeah.
essentially. It's designed to specifically kill
Yeah.
certain people.
And it was created by the Pentagon, which is why when Decoy Octopus, as Donald Anderson said, well, what about the Pentagon? And Snake was like, Pentagon? That's when the virus kicked off. That's why he died. I think President Baker made a remark like something kind of similar about that. But it's targeting very specific people with very specific blood types or with very specific nanomachines. And Snake basically is like, what is foxdie? And she explains it again, that it's basically a biohazard, that it was manufactured in a lab designed to kill very specific people with very specific traits. And Snake says, what's going to happen to me then? And she says, well, you'll die eventually. Like you will, you're not going to live into old age or anything like that. And Snake is like, what did I ever do to you? Like, why did you do this? And she said, Frank Yeager was my brother. And Snake is like, Gray Fox was your brother? Now, there's a brilliant line in it, in that conversation when Naomi Hunter says, you killed my benefactor, Big Boss, and sent my brother home a cripple. So Naomi Hunter always kind of struck me as a person who has her own agenda going on. Like, I can't imagine the pain that she went through seeing her only family on an operating table. These basically like slabs of meat, having been defeated in a minefield, and now he's being transformed into this cyborg ninja. So she's out for revenge.
Understandable.
She was out for 2 long years. She waited. And finally she got her hands on Snake, but still had to play it very, very coolly, and still appear that she was on his side. Interestingly enough, though, the person in charge of the Grey Fox experiment was a doctor by the name of Dr. Clark. And essentially what happened was the lab blew up and Clark was killed in the process. And Naomi Hunter helped to cover Frank Yeager's tracks. Dr. Clark was paramedic from Metal Gear Solid 3.
I never even caught that. God damn.
Yeah, she was paramedic.
Oh, it's all connected.
Yeah, she was paramedic from Metal Gear Solid 3. So I think it's that point when Snake says, what does Grey Fox want with me? And she says, I think he just wants one last battle with you, a fight to the death. Now, you had a phone call conversation with Colonel Campbell and Naomi Hunter in the jail area, I'm going to say, where the DARPA chief's body was, and there's this long conversation that they have between Snake's relationship with Big Boss and Grey Fox. Naomi can't believe that, like, at one stage Grey Fox and Solid Snake were best friends, and then a year or two later they were trying to kill each other. She said, how could you do that? And he was like, it's simple, we were just professionals on both sides, on 2 different sides. So Grey Fox eventually found Naomi Hunter in Rwanda, shared his rations with her, brought her back to America, and Grey Fox then went back over to join Big Boss and fight in the war in Zanzibar land. So it's all linked together.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So much thought went into that backstory, and it's crazy.
Brilliant.
Especially because Naomi is a character that had been helping you up to that point. She'd been talking to you through codec. She'd been engaging with you fairly regularly. If you called Colonel Campbell, she'd talk as well.
Yeah.
So to have that kind of
area.
Yes. So for her to have that personal vendetta against you, the player. Oh, that powerful stuff.
Yeah, and then I think that at the end of it, she's arrested or something like that. Campbell has her arrested. And this comes with one of the biggest fucking shocking moments in gaming. And after the whole shape memory alloy business happens, when you think you're deactivating Metal Gear,
Yep.
you're activating it.
Yeah.
And what happens from here?
Oh, so this is essentially the shit hits the fan moment of the game.
Yeah.
So Snake had been misled to think that he was deactivating Metal Gear to make sure it wouldn't run, when actually he was initiating the startup sequence.
Mm-hmm.
He'd been used by the villains of the game to further their agenda, essentially. Yeah. This leads to a phone call from Kazuhiro Miller, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Miller himself.
And I can't remember the exact line he says.
Thank you, Snake.
That's it. His accent changes.
Yeah.
And this great little animation of him taking off the sunglasses and a wig, essentially, or like releasing his hair.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, what? What's going on here? And it
Campbell,
turns out
Campbell cuts in onto that conversation and says, "Snake, that's not Miller."
Yeah. His body's just been found.
Yeah, his body was found. He's been dead for 3 days. I didn't notice because I've been cut off from contact with Miller.
Yeah.
And Snake says, "Then who am I speaking to?"
That's it. Yeah. The build up to the reveal is fantastic, and essentially, Liquid Snake has been your guiding force the whole game.
Brilliant.
And he did it through the guise of someone that Snake trusted.
Oh,
Solid Snake trusted. It's such a great reveal.
It's so good. It's so good.
And it feeds into this thing from earlier in the game where anytime you were encountering Liquid in some way, shape, or form, like on the Hind D fight, if you called Miller for help, he wouldn't answer. And it's because Miller was already dead. You were trying to call Liquid.
Yeah.
And the way Kojima kind of thought about that and made sure he was only available at certain points in the story makes so much sense when you realize that it was Liquid the whole time.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant. A fantastic twist.
There's very few moments in video games like when I'm sitting back like, what? I've been played all along. Like the biggest one for me is Would You Kindly from BioShock.
Yeah.
But I think Metal Gear plays on that subversion of expectation where somebody who has been guiding you all along through this turns out to be the big bad.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. I mean, it's executed flawlessly. That conversation that you have with Miller when he says that we couldn't get the codes off the DARPA chief after Ocelot killed him, which was such messy business, but it had to be done. And like as you're listening to like this guy talking, it's like the kind, friendly, knowledgeable warrior tactician turned mentor. The more he talks, the more like the more like visceral he gets with how he's speaking. Like he becomes more villainous as he's talking.
Yeah, you can sense the hatred he has for Solid Snake.
Yeah.
And it's great because it kicks off the climax of the game essentially, which is more or less just a series of boss fights. Because you go up firstly against Metal Gear, and the fight with Metal Gear is fantastic. You know, you use the Stinger missile, you have to shoot off the satellite dish. It's
the Ray Dome.
Yeah.
Otacon tells you that because he's the one who designed it, and Campbell is the one who says, "Why don't you contact Otacon or Hal Emmerich, and he might be able to tell you." And Solid Snake says, "Why would you put a big target on like on your machine?" And he said, "Oh, think of it as a character flaw. Everything has a character flaw." And it's, it's brilliant.
Love it. And it's a brilliant fight as well, because it is up to this point, you know, you fought a tank, you fought like an assault helicopter, now you're going up against a giant fucking robot, a Gundam nearly.
Yeah.
And it's so well done, and it has so many different ways to attack you. So you're constantly on the move and using your Stinger missiles to shoot at the Ray Dome, which eventually causes the cockpit to open up and Liquid is exposed. And that's when Grey Fox shows up.
The man himself.
This is just before the actual exposure in the cockpit. So Grey Fox shows up and fights with you against Metal Gear.
He uses himself as a distraction more than anything else.
Essentially, as well as ultimately destroying the Ray Dome himself.
Yeah.
And he has some final words. So first of all, he gets his arm cut off by the dick laser.
I think it's
Metal Gear Ridic laser.
he has on his arm here. He has almost like a plasma rifle or
Yeah,
something like that. Like it's a gun attached to his arm now.
yeah. His sword is gone. Um, and he's like, yeah, no, fuck it, big gun.
Yeah,
So he loses his other arm,
yeah,
and he gets pinned up against a wall. And it switches to gameplay here, which is really well done because he's pinned, he's about to die. You're playing a snake. You're aiming your stinger at the cockpit, which is now open. And if you don't, no matter what you do, you won't fire because the game is like, I can't do it. I can't kill Grey Fox. And Grey Fox has this line just before that, when he's talking to Liquid. Liquid's like, "Oh, where I come from, was it snakes foxes hunt jackals?
yeah.
No,
It's
sorry, jackals hunt foxes."
and we use
Uh,
Royal Harriers or something like that.
yeah, we use
Yeah.
Royal Harriers, and Grey Fox replies with, "A cornered fox is more dangerous than a jackal."
Oh, I love it.
Great fucking line, and
I
that's what he
love
just
it.
great moment. After that, of course, you can't kill him. You can't shoot Liquid because you'll kill Grey Fox, and Grey Fox's body limply falls to the ground. Rex steps on him, and just before he crushes him, you know, Grey Fox looks at you, and I can't remember exactly what he says,
Says Snake, listen to me. We're not tools of the government.
or anybody else.
Fighting was the only thing I was good at, but at least I fought for something, for what I always believed in.
Yeah, that was it. Fucking what a way to go out, and he gets smooshed,
Yeah, and
by Metal Gear, and
you have Snake going Fox. But
Fox.
you know what I really liked about that sequence. Actually, it's right before Fox goes after Metal Gear. Um, um, After he blows up the radome, you have a final conversation with Grey Fox, and Snake says, "Grey Fox, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?" And Grey Fox says, "I'm a prisoner of death. Only you can free me." And
Yeah.
Snake says, "Naomi Hunter doesn't. Naomi still does not. Naomi wants you alive or something like that, or Naomi told me all about you." And Grey Fox goes, "Naomi, I was the one who killed her parents." And he says, every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was her parents' faces staring back at me. So that's why I raised her and told her I was her big brother. And he says, tell her from me, I was the one who did it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like Grey Fox is like having that moment of cleansing.
Yeah. He's also the person who called you earlier to warn you about the minefield.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Which is probably why he sounded so out of breath, because his mask was off.
Yeah.
Probably speeding him oxygen or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, so well done.
So good. So good.
So now you're emboldened to take down Liquid because he's exposed now in Metal Gear Rex, and it's like, now, fuck it, you kill Grey Fox. It's on.
It's on.
Yeah. So eventually you destroy Metal Gear Rex. Go you.
Mm-hmm.
And how does it go now? So you kill it.
Yeah, from what memory tells me is once you take out Metal Gear Rex, you somehow end up on top of Metal Gear Rex.
Liquid you're knocked out, isn't it? You're knocked out and brought on top of Metal Gear Rex, the destroyed Metal Gear Rex.
Yeah, and Liquid has a nuclear bomb up on there that's kind of hooked up to Meryl's vital signs. So it's a timer part of this boss fight. So if the timer goes down, she'll die and the game is over.
Yeah.
And it also happens if she is dead, if the timer goes down, the whole place will blow up.
Yeah.
But this is where Liquid Ocelot talks about the Les Enfants Terribles project, which took place in the 1970s by the who would actually be the de facto Patriots. They basically cloned Big Boss as a safety net, that if he ever left the Patriots, at least they'd have two of his children here with him.
Yeah.
One of them was called Eli, who was in the Phantom Pain, and Eli's brother is David, who is Solid Snake. Now, one of them got the more recessive genes and one of them got the more dominant genes, and it's not told to us until the end of the game who got which got the recessive genes.
Liquid assumes that he's the one with the inferior genes,
and you'd assume a Solid Snake that after everything you've just been through and after the history that Solid Snake has, that he'd be the dominant one.
Yeah,
but it is,
he always wins.
Yeah, it's a completely different. It's kind of like a last kind of moment of holy shit. Okay, so I was wrong.
Exactly.
So you have your boss fight with Liquid on there, don't you?
Yeah, you're stripped of your gear again, and it's just a hand-to-hand fight where it's a very it's actually quite a hazardous fight because if you go too near the edge, you can be knocked off.
Hmm.
And it's a really good fight
And
because
Liquid is vastly superior in hand-to-hand combat.
oh yeah, yeah, he'll kick the shit out of you.
Yeah, he'll mop the floor with you.
Yeah, it and it's great because you're like you are going up against this larger than life character who can kick the shit out of you, but you think again like, oh, I'm the one with the superior genes. I'm gonna win.
Yeah.
If you only knew Snake.
Yeah, but even
Um,
then, it's even though you still are playing a video game. It's like I
yeah.
know I'm going to win, um, but I remember like there was times when I was fucking sweating playing
Oh yeah.
that boss
It's
battle because you have to be very careful about where you're stepping, how he has this kind of back heel attack that he can do, and
yeah. He kind of there's a big wind up where he'll kind of lean back
yeah,
and then lunge forward, spin around, and kick you, which
mhm,
has like great range on it. And you're like, whoa, crap!
yeah,
All while the timer is counting down in the background.
it is very
It's very
tense.
tense, and
It is
you
very tense.
eventually, when you're pro gamers like us,
Mhm.
you knock him off Metal Gear, and he dies again. Because he died when you blew up Metal Gear, and now he's died again.
Yeah, yeah. And he
And
died when he died again.
yeah, and this is kind of the point where the two different endings kind of begin really to come into effect. So if you succeeded at the torture scene earlier on,
Don't forget, sorry, just a quick cut in there.
oh yes,
Before you escape, Campbell gets on your
oh yeah,
photo.
Campbell calls and is arrested by the Secretary of Defense.
Jim Houseman, I think his name is, or
Yeah,
something like that. And
and
he
he's like,
basically,
I'm gonna nuke the place.
yeah, he basically says, this whole thing has been nothing but a failure. Um, we're going to send nuclear bombs onto this area, and so there'll be no evidence of Metal Gear or that we've ever been involved.
Mm.
And it's like Snake has been absolutely dicked by the people in his um in his support network. Now he's just being like fist fucked by the United States government.
Yeah,
And again, it's like what kind of happened with Big Boss. Like,
yeah,
do you know what I mean?
yeah.
You
It's
know what I
very
mean?
much a repeat of what he went through back in Snake Eater and everything thereafter,
Yeah,
where he's a tool of the government. Like, this is what Gray Fox mentioned earlier. Is like we're not tools of the government or anybody else. So
yeah,
Snake has to learn to fight for his own reasons as opposed to like, oh, I'm fighting for the government,
absolutely,
even though they're using me and they'll just cast me aside at the first opportunity.
absolutely.
It's fantastic.
Hmm.
But yeah, so then like I said before, this is the moment where the kind of split endings come into effect. So if you succeeded at the torture scene and you survived, as it were, Meryl is alive on top of Metal Gear, and you wake her up, and then the two of you begin an escape sequence. If you failed, it's Otacon who
Yeah,
helps you escape. Um, Whoever it is winds up driving the escape car that you get into, and this is actually the final gameplay section of the entire game,
yeah.
which is the escape. So you're in the back of the car driving along, and of course, Liquid shows up again.
Like it almost reminds me of like the xenomorph in like Alien Isolation. It's like, would you just get the
Yeah,
fuck out of my way? Like,
yeah. It just there comes a point where you're like, oh, come on, dude, like it's
yeah,
over. Um, and he has like the assault rifles that the soldiers were using as he's driving up, and he's like, "Woo, I'm killing!" I think you get on like a mounted turret on the back of the car,
hmm,
and this is the only time in the game I think in the original version of the game where you can shoot in first person.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you have to hold down like triangle and then
Triangle,
hold square to shoot. Awkward as fuck.
awkward,
And
so
so you
awkward.
eventually you win. You get out into the open sunlight as the sun rises.
Yeah,
Cars crash, and Liquid gets up again.
he just does not stay down. Like,
Yeah, and he walks over to you and points the gun at you, and he's like, "It's over. I'm gonna win. I'm gonna kill you." I believe planes fly overhead
yeah, they're
as
just
the
about to
ones.
begin the bombing. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, "Oh, it's over." And just before Liquid has the chance to kill you, he starts to die
yeah,
himself, convulse. And
yeah.
there's that great moment when the two brothers look at each other, and Liquid looks at him and says, "Fox."
Die.
Great scene, love it.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and
And then he kind of reaches out again, and then he dies. doesn't he? He kind of reaches out.
That's in the Twin Snakes version, I think,
Oh,
where
of
because they
course.
really like hammed up his death.
Yeah,
Because he dies, they're like, oh, and you're like,
yeah.
stop, just fucking stop.
That was a bit
uh,
much.
yeah, Twin Snakes was a bit much.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, now Liquid has been defeated. You think the bombs are about to drop, and then you get a call from Campbell, and he's like,
Yeah,
"Oh, I've taken control of the mission. The Secretary of Defense was working as a rogue agent or something like that."
yeah.
Um, and you're like,
He
"Oh, thank
essentially
fuck."
says that he'll cover everything up like that. They'll say that your escape vehicle got crashed into the water. Like I'm giving you like a clean break
Yeah,
here. Um,
essentially.
like Campbell says something along the lines of, after everything I've hidden from you, it's the least I can do. So you
Yeah,
won't be put under criminal prosecution or be
yeah.
convicted of being a war criminal.
So
Um,
giving Snake a second chance, essentially.
yeah, exactly. And I think the last person you speak to on your codec officially is Naomi Campbell. She somehow
Yeah,
manages to get in contact with you, or you get in contact with her, or she was let go out of custody or something like that.
yeah.
And I can't really remember the line of dialogue that Snake says to him, but that Snake says to Naomi Hunter. But I think it's something along the lines of, Frank wanted you to know that he loved you.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Instead of telling her what happened with her parents,
Yeah,
it was it was meant to be
protecting
like a
her.
moment of solace for her.
He's protecting her from the truth.
Exactly.
Yeah,
She'd been through enough, essentially, and so had Frank Yeager, and he
yeah,
didn't want to corrupt their relationship
yeah,
because that was the relationship between Frank and Naomi was actually built on some element of like love and care,
yeah.
even if it
Absolutely.
was at the cost of her own parents.
Yeah,
So I think that was a nice touch on Snake's part. He's like, no, it's not something that needs to be discussed.
and it's
You
that
know,
moment when you're driving off, either with Otacon or Meryl. You're on the snowmobile, and you're driving off into this new horizon, this new dawn that is rising up over the frozen crevasse of the greater plains of Alaska. And essentially the game would end there. And there's a lot more in like more kind of in-depth details in the game itself that
oh, of course,
we've
yeah,
obviously skipped over, but that's not the point why we do these. We're just talking about our feeling towards it and what we thought of the game and the mechanics and the story and the music and the script and all this kind of thing.
yeah.
There is a lot to talk about, but this is still only the second part of the Snake story. We are going to be continuing on
Mm.
the next edition pretty soon. I
And
think
that next edition is teased very soon
very soon.
because
Yeah. So what
after
happened?
the yeah, so the end credits roll, you get a little anecdote from Naomi about choosing your own fate and living for your own choices and everything. And it's a nice little touch.
All
And you
while
get it.
Enya's music is playing in the background as
Yeah,
well.
it's lovely. It's actually really nice. And there's real life video footage of like huskies
Yeah.
running through the Alaskan wilderness. It's
Yeah.
gorgeous.
It's lovely.
But then you hear a phone call between two people. One of them is Revolver Ocelot, who essentially just disappears for the third act.
Yeah,
of
it
the
was
game.
after he shoots the key card out of Snake, he
Yeah,
gets out of there very quickly.
he's just gone.
You never see him.
Yeah, so he's on the phone speaking to someone you can't hear. And he explains that he got the optical disc from Snake during the torture set sequence. So that feeds into the events of the following game where Metal Gears are everywhere.
Yeah.
He explains that the Liquid thought that he was the inferior twin with the
Yes.
inferior genes when actually it was the other way around.
That's right.
And then lastly,
I'd also like to mention there about
yeah.
the genome soldiers.
Yes,
That,
sorry.
Yeah, so the Liaison Fontarriva project we've mentioned and that kind of thing, but they also use like a very I mean minuscule percentage of Big Boss's cells to inject into the soldiers that
Yeah,
are in the
of course.
complex. So essentially, they're not as dominant genes, but they still have a portion of Big Boss in them. And
Yeah.
on this optical disc is that formula as well.
Yeah, they're meant to be like not direct clones of the boss.
Yeah,
in the same sense as Solid and Liquid were.
but that's why they have heightened senses. It's because
Yeah.
of that. Yeah,
It also, in a way, you can argue it creates another element of Snake is up against, the legacy of the big boss.
Literally,
It's a really clever touch.
Big Boss's legacy will always be around him.
Yeah, exactly. It's like this twisted fate that he has to deal with forever. And even Naomi Campbell mentions near the end of the game that Snake will one day die from the virus of Fox Die.
Yeah,
she doesn't know when.
Exactly. It's an undisclosed point in time.
Yeah, and that's part of Snake's epilogue, is him being like, I don't know when I'm going to die, but I'm going to live for myself.
Absolutely.
Great scene. And then so the final thing on Ocelot's phone call is essentially the big twist of who he was working for the whole time, when he reveals, "Yes, Mr. President," and you're like, "Wait, what? What the fuck is going on here?" And that
ends.
Yeah, I think that sets up the next game very cleverly. Even if Hideo Kojima didn't know what he was going to do next, he did build on what he set up here very well.
Yeah.
And it's such a slap in the face moment. You're like, wait, what? Who the fuck? What? Oh my god, where? This goes all the way to the top.
Yeah. But the thing is, you don't know if he's talking to, like, it is mentioned then that it was George Sears who was the United States president. But you don't know if he's talking to the American president, to the Russian president, to
it could be anybody.
Japanese president. Could have been anybody, But it leads up this great, like open kind of story to go on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Especially because it's kind of touched on in the second game that Ocelot is of Russian heritage.
Yeah.
They don't really go into that much in this game. I think if you call someone, maybe Miller or whoever, during the fight with Ocelot, you get a bit of history on them.
Yes.
But generally speaking, it's in the second game and onwards that you really find out more about his Russian heritage. And so yeah, he could be speaking to anyone, and that kind of ups the scale just that bit more. You're like, oh man, like, who is involved? Who's not involved? Where is this going? Brilliant ending. Brilliant game. Brilliant story.
Absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's a timeless masterpiece, I must say.
Love it. And then I'm going to briefly, if you don't mind, I'm going to touch on the Twin Snakes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a little bit. I know you said you never really played it that much because I had a GameCube. I know you played it at my place once or twice.
Yeah.
So Twin Snakes is essentially from the ground up remake of the original game with, enhanced graphics, redone voice acting, and new mechanics and features. In a lot of ways, I think it is a very solid game. But I have two glaring issues that I have with the game in both presentation and in gameplay. So the first one is the game came out after the sequel, Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty. So it implemented a lot of the mechanical changes that were brought in that game. Snake has more combat options in terms of melee. You can aim in first person at any time in the game now. They brought in the tranquilizer gun, and they brought in the ability to hang from rails and that kind of stuff. So all fine mechanics. They work brilliantly in the context of Metal Gear Solid 2. But Metal Gear Solid 2's enemy design was built around those mechanics.
Right.
Metal Gear Solid 1's was not.
Yeah.
These new mechanics break the game in half. It is so much easier to beat with all of these new things, especially the tranquilizer darts and first-person shooting. In the first combat playground that we mentioned earlier in the snowfield with the helipad, you can nearly just take out all the guards.
Oh, right, okay.
Before you've even left the helicopter.
Right.
Because I'm pretty sure you have the tranquilizer on you, and you have the first person, so bing bong bing.
Yeah.
You can shoot out the cameras, all that stuff. So it kind of breaks the game. Like things like the Vulcan Raven fight are much easier with the first person shooting. It's not necessarily bad. It's just I wish that they had upped the ante on the enemy AI and mechanics and things to match the new capabilities of Solid Snake.
Yeah.
Just a shame.
Yeah.
My second issue is far more prominent. So 1998 was when MGS original came out. I think it was around 2006 or 2004 that the remake came out. Okay. At this stage, The Matrix had happened.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
And clearly, whoever directed the cutscenes, I'm not sure if it was Hideo Kojima or someone at Silicon Knights, the developer of the remake, who was just a real big fan of The Matrix. So they implemented as much kind of slow-mo, bullet-timey martial arts sequences as possible. There's a scene when you meet Gray Fox in the original game. He shows up, loses his mind, leaves. In the remake, he shows up, and there's 2-minute long action set piece where he cuts a pillar in half and then kicks it at Snake, and Snake bullet dodges over it. those like flips and shit. It's like so over the top.
It's unnecessarily over the
It,
top.
it really is. Like in the encounter with Metal Gear Rex at the end of the game, in the original version, it's just Snake versus Metal Gear, and you're like, right, let's fucking go. In the remake, Snake jumps at Metal Gear, like runs, thinking he's gonna just fucking launch at the thing and kick the shit out of a giant robot. It
Yeah,
is absurd.
it's totally unnecessary. I mean, like I can understand like doing like a more graphical enhancement
Yeah,
and that kind of thing. Like that's what a remake is. Like,
yeah.
and
I think it should have been more of a remaster than a remake.
I think we've spoken about this before privately, which is like Resident Evil 1 is that's how you do a remake.
Yeah,
New
favorite game
location,
ever.
new location, new enemies, new enemy placement, the Crimson Heads, all that kind of thing.
You
Um,
build on what came before in a meaningful way without taking away what made the original special.
hmm, yeah.
Um, like even in Twin Snakes, the scene where you meet, you know, the corridor scene with Grey Fox at the end killing all the dudes in the original, that is tense. You don't know what's going to happen. In the remake, you see the scene of Grey Fox cutting through all of the people as he goes down the corridor,
Like,
and it's so over the top. He like throwing people around. He's like flipping dudes. He's like slicing them in half in midair, and like they're well made cutscenes, but they just lose a lot of the impact
they're taking
because
away the original impact of what happened.
yeah, exactly. Like Metal Gear is already like it strikes a really good balance between serious and campy. This leans too far into campy, in my opinion.
I got you.
Even like the worst of all, it's hilarious. I piss myself laughing every time. This is the worst offender. When you meet uh fucking Psycho Mantis, his scene, first of all, it starts to focus on these portraits on the wall,
Are
which
they
is
laughing?
yeah, they're the developers of the game and people who work at Nintendo and stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, they start kind of like spinning and laughing and giggling and like high pitched tones. Like, oh man, what the fuck? And then when he does the bit where put your controller on the floor and I'll vibrate it, Snake, the angle is right. So it's like this. It's pointing at him. He has his gun like this, and he turns to the camera, nods, and then turns back. Like, go on, do it. Like it's a moment that's already breaking the fourth wall, but they just went that much further to Snake being like, "Yeah, go ahead, it's okay." I don't know. It's just lots of that little stuff. It was too much for me.
Oh, fuck that.
And it's a shame because you know there is improved like production values there. It's cleaner like visuals because it's not on the PlayStation 1, it's on the GameCube. Um just little stuff like that. They re-recorded all of the dialogue
Mm,
and replaced a couple of voice actors. Mei Ling is replaced. She's not as overtly Chinese stereotype as
yeah.
she was in the original, which
Yeah.
I think was actually that was for the better because it was a little
On the
slightly
nose.
slightly racist in the
Yeah.
original version of the game. But then they replaced Gray
Gray
Fox.
Fox. Yeah.
Now they replaced him with I think it's Fred Tatasciore, who is an excellent voice actor in his own
Yeah.
right, but he's not the original.
George Bird. Yeah.
Yeah, George Berg is much more.
He has a throaty kind of raspiness to his voice.
Yeah, there's a subtlety as well to his performance where the other one again, like I'm not complaining about the game being hammy. It's just it didn't fit the tone. I think.
Mm.
Now, there's other little things as well. There's funny little Easter eggs. Like in the original version of the game, in the room where you fight Grey Fox, where you meet Otacon, there's a PlayStation 1 there.
I remember that. Yeah.
In the remake, there's a GameCube.
Yeah.
There's a Yoshi statue as well.
Mm.
Yoshi, if you shoot it in the head, he goes like this. That's harmless. That's a little detail in the background.
But doing up completely new cutscenes with can't be over the top. Yeah.
It's too much sometimes, and it's a shame because
Wasted potential.
yeah, like it is. As far as I'm concerned, it was not a bad idea. You know, at that time, doing a remake 5 years later, or 6 or 7 years later, wasn't as big a deal as it is now because, or sorry, was a bigger deal than it is now because the technology between the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 generations was a much bigger leap,
Huge. Yeah.
like than it is now. Like if you were to remake a game from, I'm not going to touch on the Last of Us remake. I'm not talking about that.
No, that's not happening. That doesn't
Uh,
exist.
but like, let's say if you were to remake Resident Evil 8,
Mhm.
which came out last gen and current gen, if you were to remake it now, it'd be like or maybe a better example would be if you remade Uncharted 4,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
because that like graphically was the peak of the PlayStation 4 for a lot of people, and
Fact.
mechanically as well. Yeah, like it was a really good game.
Hmm.
If you remade that now, you'd be like,
What's the point?
what's the point of this? Whereas back then, the
It was a
leap
big
was
thing.
so significant.
Yeah.
They had like facial expressions now. They weren't just like three lines.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's a shame. As you said, it's wasted potential there. I would love to see them have another crack at an MGS1 remake maybe in like the Phantom Pain engine.
That would be brilliant.
Um,
I know that that Konami are licensing some of their games out
mm,
for other developers. Whether or not that's going to happen now, like I take everything that Konami says on very face value nowadays. I've lost all
mm,
faith in that company.
oh,
Um, but look, just to wrap up on this new episode of the Save Point, my friend, thank you very, very much for joining me on this brand new edition. Looking forward to kicking off with the next segment of the Snake storyline. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you so, so much to everybody who's been interacting with the channel, who's been leaving comments. We really, really do appreciate it. There's three of us behind this channel. We'll also be linking our illustrator Dave's YouTube profile in the comment below. So please show him some love. Tell him that Joker and Shepard sent you. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, please, once again, do not forget to save your progress. I've been your host, Joker.
I've been your co-host, Shepard.
Have a good one, guys.
Thanks very much.